and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another pair of rounds in the 2023 Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. And this is the series, of course, that hosted by Gone Skipping Racing and sponsored by Musical Money, that looks to answer the question of who is the master of the Skip Barber Formula 2000 machine. And of course, superseded now by the Formula Ford at 1600, this series looks to keep the Skippy alive, and indeed, what a tantalising car it is, with its low weight, low power engine, but highly removable chassis and steering wheel, mean that our drivers get to enjoy the very most that the car has to offer. Indeed, when it's the car that's been the starting point of many an infamous motor racing driver's journey, including the likes of Juan Pablo Montoya, that's why the Skip Barber Formula is a treasure in motorsporting history, and that's why we make sure to honour it and memory it all the way through each year. And indeed, for our drivers, it's all about carrying the speed as fast as they possibly can from circuit to circuit. But as we get ready to go racing today in rounds 11 and 12, we are here back in Australia for the second and last time this season for none other than the Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit. Located on the island after which it takes its name, this circuit, located on the southern eastern side of Australia, is a circuit which regularly plays host to major domestic and international series over the course of each year. Whether it be World Superbike Championship, alternatively V8 Supercars Championship, or indeed in the past, of course, Formula 1 also taken to this circuit, albeit in earlier renditions. This is a circuit that is steeped in years of history, 95 years of history to be precise. Indeed, our drivers will be looking to make history here today. But as we look to get underway very shortly, of course, you're tuning in live via the official YouTube broadcast, and that may be found on youtube.com. And if you search for TX141 TX, alternatively Paul Walsh, and well, who is Paul Walsh and TX141? Well, allow me to introduce myself. I'm your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and I'll be bringing you all your racing action over the course of tonight and indeed the entirety of the series. But as for our schedule for tonight, times in British summertime, that's BST, or Universal Coordinated Time +1 UTC +1. We can see that in just under 18 minutes time, we'll be heading into our qualifying session, 15 minutes in duration, with all our drivers out of the circuit, and they'll all be looking to put in their best possible laps in order to secure pole, or at least a place on the front row before they get ready to go for the first race of the day. That'll be the round 11 sprint at 8:45 this evening, 20 minutes in duration. No pit stops expected. It's going to be a full throttle blast from start to finish, and who will come away with the big points, and of course the big score, before we go racing at once again our second race of the day. Now, of course, will be the round 12 feature race. We do have the partial inverse grid as well, and that'll kick off at approximately what is 9:10. But as we get ready to go racing, indeed in that race it'll be 40 minutes of racing action as well. We've got an absolutely action-packed schedule, and well, we talk a little bit about schedule. Let's show you the calendar so far and what still lies in wait. Now we can see here that so far we've made our way almost to the very end of the first half of the season, and today really denotes the end of the first half of rounds 11 and 12. But preceding this, back all the way on what was the 17th of March, we opened up with rounds 1 and 2 at the Charlotte Roval in the United States of America. We remained in the US of A, but made our way from North Carolina to the state of Florida for rounds 3 and 4, and that was at the Sebring International Raceway. And whereas at the Roval it was all about the tight hairpins at the Roval, catching our drivers out, and indeed some very nasty curbs as well on at the embankment. Meanwhile, at Sebring, it's all about the road surface change, the concrete and asphalt combination, and also the ability to carry speed from corner to corner and make sure to attack at the right time. And that was on the 24th of March, and then we made our first adventure to Australia in rounds 5 and 6 for none other than the New South Wales circuit of Bathurst or Mount Panorama, depending on your preference of name. And that was on the 31st of March. We got to see our drivers ascend the mountain and descend the mountain in anger. And indeed, what brilliant racing we saw, and a few tempers did fray as our drivers made their way on around. And in rounds 7 and 8, we made our way back to the United States of America for another double header, and first it was on the 7th of April in the state of Georgia at the Preston circuit. It was the roller coaster ride of road racing. It is Road Atlanta, and in rounds 9 and 10 last time out we headed to Summit Point in West Virginia, and well, on the 14th of April, goodness me, was it an absolutely brilliant set of races in the fact that we saw multiple instances of 2, 3 wide into each and every corner, and indeed our drivers had to steer clear of danger and make sure to be smart with the draft and pick up the results. And really, the one consistent constant throughout it all is, if you can find a corner on a circuit, you'll typically see Skip Barbers going approximately 2 to 3 wide into that corner, for the simple reason all the circuits that have played host to this series this year have proven it to be absolutely brilliant. And Phillip Island is expected to be more of the same today on the 21st of April, and after today we don't take a week's break, we make our way straight into the second half of the season, for we head to Japan for rounds 13 and 14 on the 28th of April, and that will be for previously known as the T1 Ada circuit, now known as the Okayama pyjama circuit, and that'll be all the sweeps, twists and turns. They'll look to catch our drivers out and who will be able to be smart with the way they approach each and every apex. After that, we continue our story in the second half of the season with the circuit Charles Villeneuve in rounds 15 and 16. We'll make our way to Montreal in calendar, not in calendar, I should say, in Canada, getting it right there, and that'll be on the 5th of May. And then rounds 17 and 18, we make our way to continental Europe for the one and only time this season, and it will be for the Nürburgring Combined or the Nürburgring Gesamtstrecke, and our drivers will take on the German circuit with full confidence, or that'll be the target at least. But as we all do know, the Nordschleife Loop in particular on that circuit is a beast of its own and perhaps the ultimate layout of any given circuit to conquer. That'll be on the 12th of May, and then the week after that for rounds 19 and 20, we're making our way back to the United States of America, which is where we'll remain for the remainder of the series. We'll start off the final trip ahead in the US of A with Belle Isle, of course the street circuit located in the city of Detroit, and of course the venue coming to an end of its tenure with regards to motorsport in the real world, but it's not coming to the end in regards to the virtual world of racing, as our drivers will take to the city streets. And then after Belle Isle, we're making our way over to the state of New York, so heading from the state of Michigan to New York for the Watkins Glen International Circuit. And we're in rounds 21 and 22, our penultimate pair of rounds, we'll see our drivers have the equivalent of Skip Barber meet NASCAR, given the high apex and average lap speed that Watkins Glen has to offer on the 26th of May. And then we'll bring it all to a close at the Virginia International Raceway, of course located in the state of Virginia, on the 2nd of June for rounds 23 and 24. And what a circuit to bring it a close. It'll be in the picturesque countryside, a very different circuit compared to what we started the season on, but back in the US of A once again, and well, we have a lot to look forward to. But going into tonight, let's give you a quick recap of the championship standings after what is now 10 rounds of racing, and we can start off with the top 10, and we can see it is Nathan Wade, who is the big name at the very top of the standings there, with an advantage now that has been extended to 144 points after his run of second place in every single race event session last time out. Whether it's qualifying, the sprint race, or the feature race, Nathan Wade was always second, not quite able to pick up the win, and perhaps a little bit frustrated at the fact that he could have picked up the win in at least one of the races, but wasn't to be. But I don't think he'll be too frustrated when he looks back and sees now he stands at 144 points clear of second place runner Rasmus Vuori. Now we know the Flying Finn is incredibly fast out there, but he's not quite had the luck go his way over the course of the season, but he now finds himself in P2, but only 2 points clear of Steffen Herrmann, with Cristian Pérez only a further 3 points behind. This trio of drivers, if you will, all close together, and will need to try and steer clear of battling one another too hard and work towards that common goal of bringing Wade down in terms of his advantage, because if not, then Nathan Wade could be going into the transition to the second half of the season with an advantage that is going to extend beyond 150 points at this rate of knots. In P5, dropping a place since last week, Jeff Randall there on 157 points. He's third to clear of Daniel Tufts. Well, Daniel Tuff showing phenomenal pace at last time out at Summit Point and able to pick up 50 points for his actions. And Adam Miles as well, now up to P7, gaining 14 places in the space of 2 rounds of points being accrued. And one of our biggest points earners there, much like Nathan Wade, both of them collected 75 points. And Adam Miles definitely an outsider now to be considered. Jack Atkinson and Gordon Vandenbergen are both a point behind in P8, P9, with Atkinson ahead of Vandenbergen based on result countback. And then we have Mark Beckhouse completing the top 10 on 118 points there and not in participation last time out. We then make our way into where's the run from P11 to P20, and we can see 4 points behind in P11. Best of the rest there, Ryan Jackson on 114, who's 4 clear of Juan Rodriguez, and it's Renko Pleiss, who's a further point off there in P13. But we can see also Nick Vaughan Roberts looking to try and get into the mix of the top 10 on P14, and only was effectively 17 points off of the top 10. David J. Burns picking up 23 points for his troubles last time out, and Burns bringing home great pace, of course, in the second race of the day at Summit Point, with Enzo Cantor, Paul Smith first, and Neil Gardner, Roddy van der Meiden, and Terry McGrath for completing the top 20. And an interesting one there, Paul Smith has not having luck he so perhaps desired or deserved at Summit Point, but definitely he'll be galvanised by what happened last time out and looking forward to tonight. We then look outside the top 20, and Titus de Jong in P21. He's on 56 points, only ahead of Kevin Budgeon based on result countback. And there's AJ Campbell in P23 ahead of Chris Wayne, with Chris Wayne only able to pick up 3 points at Summit Point. A very difficult pair of races for Chris Wayne, effectively in the end being out of the race before it got underway after the opening laps, and down to P24 now from P20. Stephen Cromwell's P25, 1 point clear of Paolo Anzioso, with Ludwig Sau, Clark Williams, Sebastian Holmichael, and JT Kopinen completing the top 30. And as we look down to P31 through to P40, we can see Nigel Easy on 15 points, 1 point clear of the trio of Peter van der Noord, Benjamin Harris and Ryan G. Walker, with Mark Rayner there in P35. Tim Bertie, P36, ahead of David Devine, and then Arnold Chebanet, Dario Frattini and Marcel Brunschweiler completing on to 40th place. And then outside the top 40, but not to be forgotten about, Wojciech Putuzek, Ollie Pimley, and that's our standing so far with our 42 drivers there, and Putuzek and Pimley the only 2 drivers yet to get points on the board. But looking from our standings into our circuit for today, of course, as we mentioned earlier, it's the Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit. Located near the town of Ventnor on the island of Phillip Island and located in the state of Victoria in Australia. This circuit, as you can see from the circuit map provided us by iRacing.com, thank you to them for their wonderful simulator and, of course, their brilliant circuit maps to go with it, is a circuit which is all about this contrast of high-speed sweeping corners and hairpins. Some of them fast, some of them quite significantly slow, and some of them extremely tight on apex. We've also got a number of elevation changes around it, albeit a two-dimensional circuit map does not quite convey those, but bringing it all together, what it means here is that a mistake is never too far away and you need to be absolutely on the ball and on the limit in order to come away on top at Phillip Island. And as our drivers make their way out of the final corner onto the start-finish straight, they'll find that's the one and only extended straight, technically, with every other straight being a sweeping curve. And as they make their way towards turn at number 1, it'll be a short lift into the opening right-hander and plenty of overtaking opportunities there, but really the overtake's coming back in the run-through 2 at the elongated hairpin, which will be of high speed as they make their way through turn 2 and down towards turns 3 and 4. The sweeper turn 3 will be flat out, but as they break their way into turn number 4, one of the slowest corners on the circuit, they'll find themselves having to set up into a transition into what is a much more aggressive remainder of the course. They'll come out of 4 and 3 the kink of 5, point uphill into turn number 6, and powering their way through the kinks of 7 and 8. They'll sweep all the way up to the highest point of the circuit at turn number 9 before barreling their way downhill into the hairpin at turn number 10, one of the slowest corners on the circuit. And as they head out of 10 in towards 11, it's then the long round sweep of turns 11 and 12 to complete the lap and do it all again. And indeed, it can feel like a bit of a pendulum effect around here given the amount of sweep on the corners, and that will be for our drivers to figure out. But as we look to our rules, and let's give you a quick reminder of those. In terms of car setup, this is an open setup series where drivers bring a setup of their choice to each and every race or each and every given round. But the only limitation on the setup is that car fuel loads have been restricted to 60% for all race day sessions. What this effectively means is it mandates a pit stop in the feature race but not in the sprint race. Qualifying wise, an open qualifying format shall be used, which means in the 15 minutes of qualifying, all our drivers will be out on circuit. And to give you a reminder of the race rules, in general, firstly, races shall commence via a standing start. This is the tradition of the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy. One faster pair is available in each race, and the driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 17 or more instant points, and they shall be disqualified from a given round if they accumulate 25 or more instant points. In terms of the sprint race, there are no mandatory pit stop requirements, and meanwhile in the feature race, the grid shall be set based on the results of the sprint race, with the top 10 finishing positions inverted. This means it's a partial reverse grid, and to explain it in layman's terms, the winner of the sprint race will be starting at P10 on the grid for the feature race, and we work our way down from P1 to P10 in terms of sprint race finishers. The P10 finisher starts on pole for the purposes of the feature race, and those that finish P11 and downwards in the sprint, that's exactly how they'll line up on the grid for the feature race. And also just to see there's one mandatory pit stop in which drivers must take on fuel in the feature race, but they may not need to take on tyres. It's entirely up to them, but we've typically seen no tyres being taken. Indeed, the tyres on the SVF 2000 machine seem to last an eternity. But it's been an eternity since we've been at trackside, and we make our way back there now as our drivers get ready to go racing, and we look to Adam Miles, and Adam Miles, of course, the force to be reckoned with last time out. If the camera wasn't focused on Nathan Wade in terms of him bringing home that series of P2s, then it was Miles who's running away out there and adding a win to his tally in the feature race. And the 85 driver here looking quite confident at the moment, but he's only 4,000 faster than Jeff Randall, and indeed quite a depleted field here today in Australia. Only 14 drivers in attendance, and I do wonder if a number of drivers not able to make the trip out here, given the fact travelling from the US of A to Australia. It's quite the lengthy fly, but those that have will now know there's a lot of points up for grabs here. Currently with a field of 14, we may have a few more drivers take to the circuit before we get qualifying underway, or indeed mid-qualifying. But as Miles makes his way through turn number 4, we do look to Steffen Krumholz as he heads across the timeline and up towards turn number 1. And the R12 Motorsport driver here looking to try and find a little bit more pace today. It's been difficult over the last couple of rounds, but you never know what he may be able to achieve, given the fact that he comes through the long right at turn number 1. He definitely has been one of those drivers who has thrown us some surprises. But as we do say hello to a good number of you there in the YouTube chat, including Beatrice Bruno Inc. or Lenk. I'm not sure whether that's an I or an L. You have to clarify that for me, Beatrice, but we do appreciate you being here and saying Skippy at Phillip Island. Fun for the whole family indeed. It is an absolutely picturesque circuit in terms of the landscape, and also on top of that, it is a brilliant place of racing action with so many places for potential overtaking opportunities. And we can see Beatrice also saying the car is super fun to drive here, such a great technical track, and indeed you've got it absolutely right in the fact this one is all about how much speed you can carry on the sweepers and then being able to be as late as possible on the brakes and nailing it into those hairpins. But of course, the better apex line you take, the better you return to full throttle. The sooner you do, then the more speed you'll carry and the higher your average lap speed will be. But as we also do say hello there to Jeff Randall, while the driver is currently parked up in the pit lane. Well, in fact, I do believe he's making his way around on circuit at the moment. The skipping racing driver in the 107 car. And we also do say hello there to SGRC at Cologne, who says hi from Cologne. Well, we're happy to have you with us here, SG. And indeed, as our drivers continue to get themselves set and composed, we look to Paul Smith first there, currently P6 in this practice session. But again, as always, we can't read too much into these practice times because you never know what amount of fuel and indeed the tyre state the laps were set in. But we should normally exclude the tyre state given the fact that the tyres last so long. Indeed, over a 40-minute race, the tyres have got barely any wear on them, so it all comes down to fuel. And some drivers might right now be doing fuel simulations for the race. Some may be doing it for qualifying, and some may be doing it in between. They've got a limited amount of time. They may be practicing on a medium or a moderate amount of fuel in order to get a general feel for the car, how it will evolve over the course of each race. But Smithhurst makes his way through turn number 2 and roars on down towards turn number 4. Well, we will very shortly hopefully have an opportunity to get an interview with one of our drivers who is currently circuit side, and well, we will try to catch up with one of them in particular, and I think we may have an opportunity to be able to have a chat with Nathan Wade. In fact, our championship leader at the moment is parked up in the pit lane waiting to go. Well, as he waits to go there, the privateer absolutely patiently waiting, and in fact deciding to make some more tweaks to the setup of the car. And well, I think we can get a patch in with Nathan Wade. We're going to try here. And as he does join me from the car, Nathan, can you hear me?
Hello, Paul.
Good evening, Nathan. And well, you're live on air as we're waiting to go racing here. And we just thought we'd check in with you quickly to ask how you're feeling for the racing today.
I'm excited for it, to be fair. I think it's going to be a nice draft fest. So I think it's going to be two and three wide most of the race. So it's probably going to be pretty boring until the last lap, to be fair. It's going to be everyone just kind of driving around, and then the last lap's going to be a hectic sprint, I think.
Oh, goodness me. So you could say, in a way, it's almost going to be like NASCAR. Everyone's going to be in quite the pack, and then it's going to be the last charge to the line.
Yeah, it's going to be a hectic last lap, I think. I think that last corner is going to probably be 4 or 5 wide, maybe.
Oh, goodness me, that is going to be absolutely sensational to see. And just coming on to your championship advantage, of course, 144 points going into tonight. You could be at least 150 points ahead come the end of the racing, indeed going into the next half of the season. Does that make you feel as though here's another major opportunity?
Hopefully. I'm just gonna try, and I'm not gonna be too silly about any of my moves. As long as I can stick with a podium, I think I'll be happy to take the points away. So.
Well, we do wish you the best of luck, Nathan, and we look forward to seeing how you get on over the course of the racing today. But indeed, all the best to you.
Cheers, Paul.
And there was Nathan Wade briefly joining us from the car, indeed doing some work on the car. It seems we caught him at a good time, albeit I think we caught him by a little bit of a surprise there. But we do try to bring you those interviews with our drivers midway through the sessions. Of course, we don't try to bring those interviews midway through the race unless one of our drivers is having a very quiet moment. Perhaps they've just made it on strategy and we try to get Phil there, but it's just to get some insight. But Nathan, as always, as cool as a cucumber is Mr. Wade, in the fact he sounds relatively not fussed about things, but I think behind that cool demeanour, of course, the focus goes on. I think it might be his way of approaching each and every race day, which is to go in there calm, collected and ready to carry on. And indeed, it has boded him so well over the course of the season so far, in the fact that every round he's turned up to, he's pulled on home a great number of points. Sometimes it hasn't worked out perfectly, and of course he is looking, you may recall from his post-round interview after the racing last time out at Summit Point. The fact that he finished P2 on the double, well, many would say that he should be absolutely pleased with that, and he was to an extent. But the one thing he has missed is bringing home another race win. And would you believe it? He has only won once this season. It's a staggering statistic, I know, in the fact that for a championship leader to have only brought home one win, but that goes to show you his consistency and the fact that every time he has turned up, he has delivered it in bringing home that consistent set of points. But I think if he could be on the top step after the racing today, either in the sprint or the feature, then he would be absolutely overjoyed. But as we do look to Daniel Tufts making his way on around, we also do say hello there to Mib Racer 77, who says, "Hi Paul, hi all, should be some good racing tonight." Indeed, that I do believe that is Paul Smithhurst who's dropping a message in from the pit lane. Indeed, a good number of drivers sat in the pit lane at the moment, most likely talking to the team managers and also getting themselves sat, perhaps taking a quick look at their phones or just getting themselves set, perhaps having a cool beverage. And well, we've got 1 minute to go before we go racing, ladies and gentlemen. And whilst we do have a minute, we'd just like to remind you this series is sponsored by Musical Money. And who is Musical Money, I hear you ask? Well, Musical Money is the quick, easy and safe way to turn your musical equipment into money, and their web address is www.musical-money.co.uk. But as our drivers make their way on around here in this final practice and to the tune of getting ready to go, indeed, if you haven't got yourself a nice cool beverage or perhaps a hot one, perhaps it's cold this evening, it's a bit chilly here in the UK where I'm based, well, I can tell you one thing, you've only got 30 seconds before you make that transition to the qualifying session to get yourself a beverage, perhaps get yourself a little bit of popcorn as well or a snack, and indeed sit down, relax and get ready for an absolutely brilliant evening of racing. And whilst the field may be a little bit low today, only 14 drivers looking to attend so far, we may see a couple more join in qualifying. We could only have 14, but still, if anything is to go by from all the racing we've seen so far, it doesn't matter if it's 10 or 20 or 30, the fact that our drivers can go 2, 3, 4 wide from corner to corner in the skippies means that there's going to be plenty to watch out for, and indeed it's all going to be about getting it right over the entirety of the race. But as we transition then into qualifying, 15 minutes, and here we go. Who's going to be on pole come the end of it? Was all of our drivers pull their way out of the pit lane as quickly as possible. Indeed, we look to the blimp camera here, and you get to see right now it's very crowded on pit lane exit. Adam Miles there having to be squeezed back a little bit behind what's Gordon Van Bergen as he makes his way on out. Well, now for our drivers, it's all go. And indeed, the big question you may be asking at this point is, what do you need to do when qualifying here at Phillip Island? Well, there's been a theme throughout the entirety of the season, and that theme has been finding a good amount of slipstream over the entirety of the lap. And that is something that is going to play a pivotal to success here as well, in the fact that the majority of this lap is flat out or close as possible to flat out, albeit we do have some heavy braking zones. But if a driver can be in the toe over the entirety of the lap within, say, 6 to 3 tenths of a driver in front and stay there all the way through, that could see them gain the best part of what will be half a second's worth of lap time advantage, if not more, compared to a clean air lap, and therefore they'll find themselves jumping up the order. And indeed, we have seen over a couple of rounds, whereas at Bathurst, for example, or alternatively more recently, what was Road Atlanta, the slipstream effect and how much time it can gain, and it has seen drivers take pole positions that have then been unassailable by other drivers as they've gone deeper and deeper into the qualifying session, and the rest of the field just simply had to put their hands up and go, right, pole's out of the question, we're now all battling for P2. But as we see Neil Garden making his way on through what is their turn at number 6, coming on through the long left cambered corner and heading up. Of course, that's one other thing we didn't really talk about. A good number of these corners do have very slight amounts of camber to them, or slightly off camber, and that can catch an unaware driver out. But of course, this field are very well rehearsed drivers in terms of circuits they go to week in, week out, and the practice laps do get put in by the dozen. But meanwhile, speaking of drivers who put in the laps every week, here is Jeff Randall, and as he makes his way on down through turn number 12, he gets ready to take us on to the opening qualifying lap of this session. Making his way up towards turn at number 1 and bringing the car over to the left-hand side very gradually as he hits the timeline, and as he heads in towards the opening corner, top gear here as he makes his way up to 122 miles an hour, 123, 124, 125 as he goes downhill, and it's a lift off the throttle as he turns on in. Manage the throttle pedal there, don't push it too hard initially, and then bring it back up to full throttle. Bring the car over towards the left-hand side here to clip the apex curve as he makes his way into tow. Drop down 2 gears, stay in third as he pounds his way on out, and now down towards turn at number 3 he goes as he builds his way back onto full throttle and heading through the long left-hand kick. Of course, a descent here as he goes up to 5th gear, top gear once again, all the way through and heading out towards the turn 4 hairpin. Keeps the car over to the left, looks his brake mark on the left-hand side and braking there at the last brake board. Come coming on through turn number 4, clipping the apex in first gear, and back on the throttle, charging out now through the kink of 5, and into turn number 6. 9-6 dropping the gear there, quickly dropping it down the gearbox and the tap of the brakes. He makes his way through the left-hander, using the camber to give him confidence to return to full throttle. And as he makes his way up through when it's turn number 7 and into 8 here, flat out through 7, it'll be flat out for 8 as well. 4th gear getting ready to jump into 5th gear. Will he jump or will he stay in 4th? In fact, there as he comes up through turn at number 8, he's going to stay in 4th and lift off the throttle to tighten the car towards the apex. Over the ridge and now heading downhill here in 4th gear and onto the brakes. It's a long braking zone because of the amount of downhill descent as he makes way out to 10 in 2nd gear. Through 11 here, just building up the throttle up to 3rd gear, full commitment, flat out all the way. Let the car come out to the right hand side now, coming into turn number 12. Keep on going, flat out all the way. There's no holding back as he makes his way towards the timeline. And well, it's been a smooth lap from Jeff Randall. That's normally a good sign of a fast lap. But as he heads to the timeline, what's it going to be? As you can see behind us, Adam Miles who's tucked in. Well, for Randall, his first lap will be a 1:47.159. Miles, meanwhile, almost a second faster, a 1:46.259. And that goes to show you how much the tow is worth. A good clean lap is going to be surpassed by approximately 7 to 8 to 9 tenths by a driver who's able to stay in your toe all the way round the lap. Indeed, of course, keep in mind our drivers are on cold tyres at the moment. They normally take about 2-3 laps to get up to temperature on those tyres. So for Adam Miles to be able to put that lap in from the outset, it's 2.5 tenths faster than everybody else. Of course, we've got a long way to go in this qualifying session, but the lap times are quite extended, so we do have to keep in mind that will mean for our drivers they do not have that many laps available to them. If you do a bit quick of mental maths and you say it's 1 3/4 of a minute into a 15-minute session, and what you do find in that is going to be about a grand total of what will be 8 to 9 laps out there if you do include as part of that calculation what is the out lap. And of course, if our drivers decide to make the way back to the pits, that's going to cost them significant time. But Miles is the first one out there to set the pole lap, and now everyone's got to try and beat it as Miles tries to raise the bar. But as he comes on through here, qualifying will be a key factor in terms of how you're placed on that grid. But will it be a key factor in terms of determining success? Well, it may be a means of you being able to be right at the front of the field and in that lead pack for the race. Again, as we heard from Nathan Wade in the build-up to going racing today, saying that really it should be relatively quiet over the course of the race. In terms of, you'll see nip and tuck, you'll see back and forth, but it's that final lap where everybody's going to be absolutely salivating at the prospect of taking the win. If you can stay with the lead pack, then qualifying not going to be too much of an issue. But of course, the further you qualify down the order, it's those little niche battles between drivers that can suddenly escalate into seeing the pack, or the pack that you're part of in that niche group, fall away from the lead pack, and then you start to lose out more and more, and suddenly the points you can gain in the race crumble away. But meanwhile, Steffen Herrmann coming to the time lanes, currently P7, 1.5 seconds off of pole. He improves there by 4 tenths, and tyre temperature now starting to come in. Of course, he's getting the toe there at Pala Anzi also, as we see the Italian making his way through turn at number 1 and up towards 2. Somebody's had a bit of a lock up there on the exit of 1. I think getting it slightly wrong. We're not quite sure who, but mistakes are evident. Indeed, with the circuit being such high speed and the car constantly being on edge of rotation, which does mean that our drivers will want to set up the cars to be quite unstable. So they've got plenty of rotation through each and every corner. They will not want understeering the car at all. But as you give the car more and more rotation in terms of loosening up that anti-roll bar, well, it does also lead to the fact that the car does become very sensitive and likely to oversteer. But as Nathan Wade makes his way into his turn at number 6, chasing after there, Jeff Randall. Well, Randall giving up Wade a bit of a tow as they make the way on around. And I think Wade will be very appreciative of this. He follows the 107 driver, but he's quite close to the back of Randall, with Miles also being ahead of Randall and the 3 being compressed here. Will this potentially compromise their laps? Wade's gone the fastest of everybody in sector 1, so that's the run through turns 1 through to 3, and that's going to be a critical setup to the lap. He makes his way downhill in towards turn number 10 now, and well, they're having a little bit of a wobble under braking, and I think that's more to try and bleed off a little bit of the overspeed in the toe. And as he makes his way through 11, well, Miles there backs out. Meanwhile, Wade is going to stay right behind Randall. I think he's confident here that Randall can act as a little bit of a slipstream magnet as they make the way out of the final corner. And what's it going to be here for Wade? Well, Randall's improving on the personal best. Randall currently being P6, 9 tenths off of the pole lap. Miles absolutely putting the lap up there, but meanwhile Wade right up the rear of where's Randall, and as they come to the line, and Wade goes for his pole on a 46.095. Miles holds P2 still, but Randall improves to P3. Now halving his deficit to the pole lap, albeit still 3 tenths off, but now Wade is going to give Randall an opportunity here. The two of them working together Meanwhile, as we look from them to Steffen Herrmann, currently P8, we're hearing that JT Kopinen and AJ Campbell have moved to P9, P10 respectively, and a 46.8 and a 47.3. They're trying to work together a little bit further back as we do look back to them. In fact, here is Kopinen with Campbell immediately behind him, and as they come out of the corner and down towards what is turn number 3, and in fact between the two, that's Daniel Tuss, we should point out. And meanwhile, Stefan Krumholz goes back to P10 on 47.259. But Krumholz taking a very interesting approach. He's not looking for tow whatsoever. He's all by his lonesome. As meanwhile, Clark Williams is just leaving the pit lane, yet to get a time on the board. And well, as we do see Williams emerging from the long pit lane on the left-hand side of the circuit, well, they're going on out in what's the number 98 car, the green machine, as he makes his way on down. We look forward to seeing how he can get on today, but he has left it quite late in the session, given the fact we're already past the halfway point, and now he's only got what is there the best amount of 6.5 minutes before we do head into overtime, and that's why drivers are permitted to finish their lap. But indeed, as they make their way on round, in fact, they're not permitted to finish their lap. Let me correct myself there. When we hit the 15-minute counter, there is no overtime, and the qualifying session is immediately over, so you need to set the lap within the 15 minutes. But as we do see Wade heading on down, indeed, that will mean for Williams right now, he's in fact not got many laps to go, because after the outlap, you have about 4 laps, if that, more likely 3. Well, Wade and what is there, Randall heading on around, and will Randall taking the tow here, but he's not been able to capitalise on it by comparison, and now goes on to another lap, and in front of them they do have Miles, who improves in P2 to a 46.129. Garner meanwhile jumps up to P3, takes Randall down to the second spot of the second row with 46.359, and as they power their way down, meanwhile, we see Steffen Herrmann heading up through 1 into 2, and well, he does not improve there. Neither does the driver behind him, and that is number 71 of always Pala Anzioso's P13, the lowest placed driver who's set a lap so far in this qualifying session. But meanwhile, Gordon van den Bergen back into P8 with a little bit of a wobble there coming out of turn at number 2. Randall's gone purple in sector 1. We'll keep our eyes on that. But I think right now, van den Bergen not happy with the state of the tyres. He keeps trying to get some more tyre temperature in. I think for him right now, all he's got to try and do is get the temperature up and then get in the tow, because he's on a long line of cars here. He's affecting the line of what is 4 to 5 cars, all a bit equidistant from one another. But the thing here is, as you start to gain that tow, you naturally get close to the car in front, which in turn is getting close to the car in front of it, so you'll gain a double tow, then becomes a triple tow if you can see it's close up to the rest of the cars in the back. So therefore the slipstream can prove very strong, and it can become an absolute Goliath in terms of lap time. But right now it really is the showdown between Wade and Miles. Only what is 3.5 hundredths between the pair, and it's Adam Miles who is ahead of the pack as they make their way around to complete what will be for them their 5th fast lap, or their 6th overall qualifying lap when you include the outlap as well, as our drivers make their way down towards turn number 12. Coming down, you can see the pit lane entry, and Miles releases Randall, and Randall is on a personal best so far. He's gone purple in sector 1, personal best in sector 2. What's it going to be in the final sector, and how far will it bring him up towards that pole lap? A 46.095 to beat, and as Randall crosses the timeline, it's going to be provisional pole for Randall. It's the first 45 of the session. It's a 45.895. That's almost 2 tenths faster than Nathan Wade. Just out by thousandths to Pippin by 2 tenths. But for Randall, he won't mind that. He'll know the lap is now coming. But of course, the respect will be given in kind, where he'll give the tow to Wade and Miles. The drivers working together. It's almost like a gentleman's agreement in the way, in terms of if you give the tow to one driver, then that driver is expected to give you the tow on the next lap. You can stay with them. But as they make their way down towards turn 3 and 4 once again, well, meanwhile, we do look to Clark Williams, who has got a time on the board, but Williams still trying to find the time. He's not got a truly representative time, but he's got a valid one to be able to qualify on the grid, P14, but he is 7.5 seconds off the pole lap, and with that 6 seconds approximately off Anzioso's P13 lap, as we see Williams heading through the final corner, and well, can he find a bit more time as he comes on around? My gut feeling says yes, he will. He's gone personal best in both of the opening sectors. Final sector comes to line. And what's it going to be for the number 98 driver here? Well, as we see the time board updated, it's 47.754, and it will now be half a second off Anzioso, so it does look as though Williams starting to find his rhythm, but he's only really got this next lap in which to get the better lap to the Bear, because otherwise he will not have enough time in the day, given the fact we do not have overtime in qualifying. And now all our drivers here, they'll be looking to charge onto one final lap if they're not already on it, and we see the Marlboro machine of Neil Gardner making its way on down. Of course, that's a throwback to the old McLaren Honda livery on the MP44, dating back back to the 80s and 90s of Formula 1. But as he makes his way on through the left hand there of turn number 12, and coming on down, Neil Gardner purple in sector 2, and that's the most technical sector on the circuit, arguably. And as he comes on through, it's P1 for Neil Gardner at the moment, 45.623, 2.5 tenths faster than Jeff Randall. Well, Gardner has absolutely knocked it out of the park. They'll have one more lap available to them, given they've just got over 2 minutes to go, and now precisely 2 minutes. But as they head on through into turn number 2, Gardner now absolutely high on life. Meanwhile, getting it very wrong and taking to the gravel trap there. That's Nathan Wade, and for Wade, that'll be his qualifying session all said and done. And what exactly happened to Nathan Wade? Coming on through turn number 1, drifting wide onto the grass, and he can't get the car stopped, and the car just simply lets go and takes him with it as he makes his way into turn number 2. Well, that's very unfortunate for Nathan Wade, and that will mean for him now that his qualifying essentially is done. You can see there in frustration trying to turn the car around on the grass, but meanwhile looking to Jeff Randall as he comes on through turn number 6 and up towards 7-8 he goes. Well, Randall currently P2, and he'll feel a little bit of confidence starting to creep in the fact that Miles is P5 and Miles has not improved. He's had to go to the pit lane, and also with the fact that Gardner's on pole and it's Wade in P4 at very best now, it's an open goal here for Randall to be on that front row. I don't think he's going to improve as he makes his way on around for what is their turn number 9 down towards 10, given the fact he's not got any tow available to him. But meanwhile, one driver who we haven't really talked about in this qualifying session is the Shell V-Power Team Racing driver of Ryan Jackson. As he makes his way around here, he's gone personal best in Sector 1, not improved in Sector 2. He's relatively close to his previous best. Randall into the pit lane, and Jackson will not have the tow coming on to the start-finish straight, which is where he'll need it most. But Jackson started P6, and he's normally very strong when he starts on the third row because he finds a way to get in amongst that lead pack, and he normally jumps right onto the front of the race early on. But as he makes his way across the timeline, will it be an improvement? No, it will not for Jackson. Meanwhile, for Steffen Herrmann, as we also hear that AJ Campbell's into the pit lane, and Herrmann comes in as well, albeit almost drifting off the road there, but just about keeps it on track. JT Kopinen heading to the line. Now 10 seconds, he'll get there just in time. Currently P11, 1.2 seconds off of pole, and will it be an improvement? No, he stays at P11, but that is qualifying complete, ladies and gentlemen, and it will be Neil Gardner who takes pole position here at Phillip Island for what is round number 11. The sprint that's coming up. As our drivers make their way to the grid then, this is how they'll line up for the first race of the day. It's the round 11 sprint in the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy for 2023 and sponsored by Musical Money, and it will be Neil Gardner who starts on pole here for the Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit. He's joined on the front row by Gone Skipping Racing's Jeff Randall, with Gordon Vandenbergen and Nathan Wade line up together on the second row. The Sickhead Racing driver having a strong qualifying session in the end ahead of the privateer who lost out at the end to be on the front row. Adam Miles starts P5 after a good start to the qualifying session, not quite able to replicate that initial provisional pole lap with a stronger one, and Ryan Jackson, his fellow privateer, P6 there, and we'll watch out for Jackson. We reckon he could spring some surprises. AJ Campbell will not be starting on the full throw, but it will indeed be Steffen Herrmann who jumped up there ahead of Campbell and Krumholz and Smithhurst, and it will be Steffen Herrmann starts P7, joined on the full throw by Paul Smithhurst, and behind them the pair from Artel Motorsport of AJ Campbell and Stefan Krumholz to complete the top 10. It's JT Kopinen starts P11, best of the rest there on the 6th row, joined by Artel Motorsport Blues at Paolo Anzioso, and then starting on our final row, last but not least, it's the pair of Daniel Tufts and Clark Williams. And well, for Williams, it was a qualifying session that he joined late to and wasn't quite able to get the time in, but he got a representative lap, and he'll know that he's on the relative ballpark pace compared to the second half of the grid. And can he find a way to jump his way up the order as time goes on? That'll be the ultimate challenge as our blimp just gradually passes its way over the grid at the moment. It's great to see all the drivers line up. They're all set. It's time to go racing, ladies and gentlemen. One red light, two red lights, three red lights, four red lights, five red lights. And it's lights out, and away we go for our first race of the day as Neil Gardner gets a good launch off the line, and Jeff Randall jumps in behind. Now as Gardner pounds his way down towards turn at number 1, New Zealand here will be thinking about what can he do to maintain that lead or enable the pack to break away with him at the tip of the spear. As he comes on through the right hand, tucking in behind Randall, Vandenbergen and Wade. They stay as they were, albeit Wade having to go a little bit defensive versus Miles there in the run through 1 into 2. But as they come down into the left-hander 2, now you can see a bit further back, JT Kopinen tucking in behind AJ Campbell and Stefan Krumholz as the two of them exchange places. Campbell now ahead as they make their way out towards turn at number 3. In fact, that's Krumholz ahead as they come down. That's the only major change on the opening couple of corners, but as they head up towards turn number 4, I think we're about to see our initial battling under braking here as Randall has to go defensive. Meanwhile, looking around the outside, that's Vandenberg and trying to go round. Can't quite find it at the moment. Randall going slightly defensive there as they made the way further out of 4 in towards 5 and 6, but further back, meanwhile, got Adam Miles who finds himself in an exchange with Ryan Jackson. Jackson looking around the outside of turn number 6. He tries to get it done, but tucks back in the end. But you can see how the top 4 are starting to create a small gap for themselves as they power their way up towards turns at 7, 8, 9 and 10. We're coming up the hill through at turn number 8 into 9 now. Will Miles just have to wait as Vandenbergen, meanwhile, under pressure from Nathan Wade. Wade on the inside, but Vandenbergen will defend here as they come over the crest and down into the dip. Onto the brakes they both go. Vandenbergen on the left, your picture, Wade on the right, and further behind them we see AJ coming. There's a lock-up, and that is, I think, Palanzioso coming together with JT Capin and Clark Williams coming into the scene of the instant. It's a disaster for the trio. Clark Williams carries on, but for Capin and Anzioso, that may be a visit to the pits for them. Well, Capin's got running, but I'm not sure about Anzioso. But meanwhile, after one lap of racing, it's Neil Garner who leads the way as they make their way down towards turn number 1 once again. Or does he as they come to the timeline? It looks like it's actually Jeff Randall who's your race leader. After one lap, he creeps ahead as they come into the first quarter for the second time of asking. It's Randall who leads ahead, Neil Garner P2, Nathan Wade P3, ahead of Vandenberg and Adam Miles who fight for P4 immediately behind him. And it's Ryan Jackson P6 ahead of what is all called that fault there for a moment. Vandenbergen almost losing it in the run out of 1 into 2, catches the car just in time as he holds off Adam Miles, but behind them is Jackson, followed by Herrmann, Smithhurst and Grimholz, and then completing the top 10 it's Daniel Tufts with AJ Campbell behind him P11. But as they make the way through and down towards turn number 4, meanwhile we look back up to Vandenbergen who finds himself here in a long trail as he tries to hold on versus Adam Miles. Onto the brakes they go, Jackson up the inside, it's going to get very close there as they make the way on out. It does look very nip and tuck between the trio of Jackson, Miles and Vandenbergen. Smithhurst also trying to get in the mix, his elbows out here, albeit they can't afford to make too much contact because of course these open wheel racing machines quite fragile on the suspension. If you do get caught up on another drive suspension rods, it's going to be all over for the pair of you. It'll be damage to the tyre, if not to the suspension, as they make their way out to 7 through 8 and up towards 9. But Jackson still side by side with Smithhurst. They come through the left-hander, and Smithhurst doing everything here to try and put Jackson under pressure. But Jackson, of course, will have the run on the inside now down into turn number 10, and Smithhurst in return now being pushed on by Herrmann as Herrmann looking around the outside here for turn number 11, meaning that he's going to have to wait his turn as they make the way towards the timeline. But powering the way down and around, well, it's been definitely an interesting opening 2 laps. We have seen a relative calm at the front of the field, but it's just behind the front where everything is starting to erupt. And meanwhile, as they head across that timeline, we do have an opportunity very shortly to bring you a replay of what happened in that battle between Capin and Anzioso, with Williams also getting involved. But before we do, we focus here on the battle 3 wide here. Jackson in the middle. It's going to be Smithhurst on the outside, and on the inside it's going to be Herrmann. And well, Jackson now having the reverse Moses pulled on him, as meanwhile it's Smithhurst who tries to hold the inside into 2 from the outside of 1. Going round his outside, how is Herrmann? But Herrmann there, a little bit of a drift, a bit of oversteer creeping on in. And for Herrmann, he drops 2 places as they make the way through. We're also seeing that Jeff Randall's been involved in an instant turn number 2. We'll try and get an understanding of what exactly happened there very shortly. I believe we saw some smoke being kicked up, and Randall may have had a brief foray off circuit. But as they make the way in towards the hairpin of turn number 4, up the inside there goes Steffen Grimholz, very aggressive on the brakes, and the outside motorsport driver goes all in, but he can't quite find it in the end as he brings himself back up to speed. And well, Jackson's been dropping places here for all the fighting, and Grimholz trying to find another place in him, but can't find it as Jackson fights back, and they make the way up the hill towards turn number 9. But as we do take a brief breather, let's take a look at what exactly happened between JT Capin and Paolo Anzioso. This was in the run down towards turn number 10 as they made their way down the hill. I think Capin in here under brake, and Anzioso looks at the inside. It's a lock-up, and it collects the 2 of them, and then Williams simply comes into the scene of the instant. And as we get that on board from Clark Williams' perspective, well, of course, he'll be feeling as though, okay, it's just time to back out of all the fighting. And with some smoke will go up in front, he won't exactly know how this is going to play out. And then Anzioso just turned across his path of racing, and for Williams in the wrong place at the wrong time. And well, for Capin and Anzioso, it's ended up in difficulty. But as we return to your live pictures, ladies and gentlemen, we will very shortly take a look at what happened to Jeff Randall as well, as we're hearing that Williams did have to come into the pit lane for repair work, and meanwhile Anzio and Corbin staying out on circuit. But you're looking here at Crimmels looking up the inside in turn 1 versus Wes Jackson, the battle for P7. These two are not relenting for one moment as they come into long right-hander. I think Jackson designed to back off here and let Crimmels take the position, because the pair are losing the lead pack at the moment. The top 6 are creeping away by a second. And as they come through turn number 2, that'll be the way it stays at the moment of the battle for P7. But meanwhile, here's Gordon van den Bergen, your race leader now. He's jumped ahead through all the battle into turns 1 and 2 with Adam Miles alongside him. And as they come down through the left, Miles is going to get ahead on the inside to outside line. But of course, here we know the way the circuit switches back from corner to corner. And that was a prevalent theme at Summit Point last week. And we're seeing that again here at Phillip Island, in the fact that it does continue to swap around in terms of the circuit layout. And those direction changes are really proving to our drivers they need to be smart about knowing when it's the right place to be in the sequence, to be on the inside of one corner, to set yourself up on the inside of a corner 3 or 4 down the line. As they make their way out of turn at 6 and 7 and up towards 8, 9 they go. Well, Van den Bergen in P3 is keeping Nathan Wade at bay, but meanwhile Steffen Herrmann closing up, and we ride on board here with the number 12 driver as he heads in towards turn number 9. Of course, when you're at the back of this group, this is where you do have some breathing room, albeit this is not a fuel-saving race because it is a sprint, there's no pit stop, but this is where if you were in a feature race, such as the next round, then you would be trying to fuel save here, really tuck in. Of course, all the field we're doing so, but for Herrmann, he's got to just simply play the game now. It's a waiting game. You have to be patient because, of course, it's not in this minute, in the 8th minute of the race, where you'll want to make the ground. It will be in approximately 11 minutes' time. We go on to that final lap. That is where you need to start picking off the places, or for Herrmann's sake, the final 2 laps of this race, he wants to start gaining ground and pushing on. But as we see him looking around the outside here, the MI racing car of their Smithers as they head into the opening corner. It's 2 by 2 by 2, and Herrmann here holding the outside. He's going to close into the racing line apex here as he makes his way on through, and Smithers backs off, and Wade there with a slightly compromised line from the 2 wide versus Van den Bergen. We see Van den Bergen have a bit of a slow run into the corner apex, and off he goes. Well, as they do, it's going to be close here as they run the way line astern down. The leader's going 2 wide through the King Cup 3 once again, with Neil Gardner ahead on the run to the inside of turn number 4, and Miles there on the outside of the background of the camera shot. But as they make their way onto the brakes here, Wade looking up the inside of Van den Bergen, and Herrmann just waiting to see what he can pick out of this exchange, and no way through at the moment. It's going to be 2 wide on exit, and Herrmann's going to try and thread the needle, but he's going to look around the outside. Is this going to be an attempt to cut back off of the apex of the corner? I don't think so. I think he's not going to be close enough to be able to get the momentum as they head up towards turn at number 9. But as they climb the rise here, you can definitely see how this top 6 continue to try and break away. But Steffen Krimmel's now only still a second off of the top 6, and the Artel Motorsport driver is being given all the breathing room he needs from Jackson to be able to try and bring the pair back up into that top 6 group to turn it into a top 8. But it's coming on down and around through turn number 10. Well, onto the brakes they go, and we have an opportunity to take a look at what happened to Jeff Randall on the start of lap number 3. As he made his way in towards turn number 2, he was leading at the time, goes a bit deep, collects the car, and as he does, well, the car drops off circuit, and once you fall off the circuit here, the way the grass is laid out, it slopes away from the road surface, and that means you've got a long journey back. But for Randall, he came on back, but he's in P10 now as we return to your live pictures, and there's an uncharacteristic error from Jeff Randall. But meanwhile, we can see Crimmels versus Jackson again, and well, these two side by side. I think Jackson's getting a bit bored of waiting as they make their way through the right hand of Crimmels, going to hold the inside into turn number 1. But meanwhile, looking up to the leaders here, Miles finds himself in the middle of the road. He's looking at a driver on his inside and a driver on his outside. That's been Neil Garner, who tries to make his way on through. And on the other side, it's Gordon van den Bergen. Well, in fact, that's not Gordon van den Bergen. It is going to be Nathan Wade, who drops a bit further back, we do believe, with Van den Bergen there trying to put the pressure on. But as they make their way up towards turn at number 4, well, Van den Bergen now on the outside, trying to look around the outside of where's Nathan Wade there. Goes all in. But meanwhile, Adam Miles defending. And as they come out of the corner, well, Miles really dictating the pace here for the middle section of the lap. Garner cutting back to the inside, very close on the brakes between them here, but Miles continues to lead, and it does look as though right now Miles trying to make himself a bit of a cork in the bottle and trying to make everyone behind face off against one and fight hard, and perhaps he'll be able to break away or just cut that pack of 6 down to what will be, say, a pack of 2 or 3 drives and make his job a little bit easier. But coming uphill through the left-hander turn number 9, we can see Wade there versus what is Herrmann, and Herrmann holding on to the position as they come down into the braking zone for turn number 10. A small lock up there for Van den Bergen, but meanwhile for Jackson versus Crimmels up the inside of Crimmels gets the return move to P7 done. And Jackson right now, I think he can taste the slipstream of the drivers in front, albeit it's a 1.6 second gap to Paul Smithers, and with Smithers being so close to Wade, Herrmann, Van den Bergen, Gardner and Miles, I think for Jackson now he finds himself in that struggle to get in enough of the toe to be able to close up, and instead he's having to deal with this battle for P7 at least until the last laps of this race. As they make their way to the timeline. Meanwhile, here's your race leaders here, are looking to go side by side into turn at number 1. Gardner this time on the outside, looking to set up the inside into turn number 2. Miles there still all the way through, and as they come up towards the braking zone, again, patience being demonstrated by both drivers here, giving respect and giving space. But at some point, there will be a moment when they start to think less and less about giving the space and more about they've got to get a move on to try and win this race. And it's going to be Gardner who holds the lead this time as he makes his way down towards the braking zone. But as he does towards turn 4, he picks the outside of 3. That'll give him the run he needs to be covered off into the hairpin. But coming on through, meanwhile, Wade down the outside as well of Van den Bergen, and Paul Smith is just looking on as we can see there. Steffen Herrmann trying to make it around the outside of the P2 driver of Gardner. He can't quite find it at the moment, but he may here into turn number 6. He looks for it, and Gardner gives him all the space in the world. But I think now Steffen Herrmann trying to make it clear he wants to be at the front of this group, so that way he can lead it to the line. Or Neil Gardner being patient, tucks in then P3 with Gordon Van den Bergen just off of him. And as they come through turn number 8 up towards 9, well, the exchanges there continue to rage on. And again, everybody playing a little bit of a game of chess at the moment in terms of where they want to be in this pack of drivers, and we're all waiting to see who exactly is going to be the one who decides to make a move that could see this pack break up, alternatively ascends to the front of the field and then digs in deep to try and win. Well, Adam Miles again the leader, and he really has been the leader of this group for some time in terms of the majority of the lap being led is in his name. But as he comes on down through turn number 12, where he's going to have Herrmann closing very rapidly as they make their way on to the next lap. Heading on towards turn number 1 once more. We are into the second half of this race. We have completed with a grand total of 7 laps thus far, and we've still got approximately what is going to be another 5 to go, including the final lap. But as they head into turn 1, it's going to be 4 wide for a brief moment, but Van den Bergen backs out there quite sensibly so, and I think that could be a bit of foreshadowing of what's to come on the final lap. As they all thought about it for a moment, I think they all had a sense check at the same time, which is this isn't the final lap right now, why are we doing this? But as they make their way through turn number 2, well, Miles head drops back to P2, and he's got Gardner and Wade all over the back of him as Herrmann takes the lead of this race for the first time today, and heading up towards turn number 4 now. Well, it's going to be Gardner who looks outside to inside a line, which he really is coveting, but in return you can see Wade also in the middle there, not quite able to stick in, as it's going to be 3 wide and Gardner up the inside. Miles goes a bit deep as he turns on in, Herrmann overcooks the corner, and well, in the end Van den Bergen comes from on the inside, but brilliant manoeuvre in there from Neil Gardner. You can see why he loves being on that inside line for turn number 4. It gives him safety, and well, with all of that, Steffen Herrmann moves back into P2 on the inside of Van den Bergen into P6, and as they make the way up the hill, I think Steffen Herrmann here could be giving Gardner an opportunity to break away, because it does look as though Herrmann's just not as comfortable in the lead of this group compared to the rest of them, and if Gardner can steer clear and not be brought back into this, I think it could really start to go Gardner's way in the closing stages. But as they come down the hill, where it's going to be O'Neill's P2, meanwhile Miles P3, and then Van den Bergen P4 ahead of Wade and Smithers, meanwhile behind Crimmels and what is Jackson are closing. They're now 1.2 seconds off, so the altercation at turn number 4 is definitely starting to bring these two packs together, and you've got what is Jeff Randall only 1.6 seconds off, still trying to get into the fight, albeit he's bringing with him Daniel Tufts here as they make their way down, so this top 10 could yet coalesce in the final lap if they all fight hard, and well, who knows what could happen. But as they make their way onto another lap, we do look from what is Daniel Tufts up to In fact, we stay with Daniel Tufts for a brief moment, you have to excuse me, and as they make their way down towards turn at number 1, he's going to look around the outside here, and well, Randall just backing off and letting it go, and meanwhile Jackson and Crimmels also make an exchange, but we look back up to the leaders, and well, Herrmann holds the lead as they go 3 wide into 2 behind. It's going to be Gardner in the middle of the road with Van den Bergen on the inside, and this time Miles on the outside, but as we ride on board and look back from the gearbox to Steffen Herrmann, of course here he'll be just hoping they continue to fight one another and somebody gets it wrong and potentially puts a much bigger gap in, and you see a little bit of contact there, a brief tap between the wheels of Gardner and it's Miles onto the brakes into turn 4. They go this time. Garner on his standard line of the inside of 4. Battling with Van den Bergen and Herrmann meanwhile as he comes on out of the corner, making his way up towards turn number 6. And well, it's going to be the number 12 driver here who tries to put his foot down, but again he does seem a little bit uncomfortable on clean air pace compared to his peers behind, and I think for him it's about just simply trying to be the leader come the run out of the final corner. I don't think he's going to be able to make a break here. I think he will be brought back into the pack and they will start to dance with him as they make their way up through turn number 9. Now going from the left hand down the hill into the braking zone. Interesting livery there, in fact, on Neil Garner 74. And the fact that one side of it is, of course, the old McLaren. On the other side, I'm not quite able to discern what livery that is a reference to. Indeed, a previous motorsport livery, if one. But as he comes on through turn number 11 at the moment, you can see the fangs on the left-hand side of the car from our perspective, driver's perspective, right-hand side, and definitely looking to grin and bear them. But as they come down through turn at number 13, wonderful sweeping camera shot here. We get a sense of the curvature of the corner, but at the same time, the speed they carry as they make the way onto the start-finish line. And what it is going to be, what is another 3 laps to go as they head across the timeline. It's going to be Garner retakes the lead here as they head into the opening corner, and well, it's 3 at the front. Van den Bergen also trying to go around the outside to inside. It's going to be a brave move of Van den Bergen if he can get this covered off, and that may set him up for an opportunity to try and do what Garner was trying to do only a couple of laps to go as they make the way on down towards turn number 4 now. You see everybody sliding on through, and it does look as though with Smithhurst there in P6, only 1 second clear of the battle for P7 behind, we could be seeing now when it's Jackson and Krummel's closed up enough to be in contention right at the end for as they make the way down towards turn number 4. Well, Van den Bergen here, he's making the move on the outside stick from racing line. Meanwhile, Neil Garner being forced backwards, and Nathan Wade is starting to get a move on. You'll remember in the pre-qualifying interview with Nathan Wade, he was saying that the race should be relatively quiet, just back and forth exchanges, but it'll be the final lap in particular where it all comes alive. And Wade definitely now, I think, eager to get towards the front of the pack, because after this lap he will have 2 more to go if our maths is correct. It's going to be close, but I think they will squeeze in at 2 more laps. And as he comes on down through turn number 6, or up through turn number 6, turn number 9 I should say, turn the number upside down, and with it also the geometry, and as they head in towards turn number 10, we can see here the top 4 all staying linear. Meanwhile, Adam Miles now waiting on behind as they head up towards turn number 10. And Miles here, we know how fast Miles is in the tow. He's been extremely fast all race session, but will he be able to jump his way back through the field? Given the fact he's been knocked down, this is the lowest place he's been in the race in terms of P5, albeit still in the pack. As you can see, Krumholz and Jackson now right on this group, and Jeff Randall and Daniel Tufts only 2 seconds off. They could become a factor in this, so it's a top 8 battle for the win at the moment. It could become a top 10 battle as they make their way down towards the opening corner for the penultimate time. Wade on the inside versus Van den Bergen. He goes for the move here, he takes the lead for a brief moment. But will it stay that way, or will he find himself being usurped shortly? Well, Van den Bergen takes a little bit of a peek to the inside. Can't quite find it as they come on down and around. But as they roll off the corner and up towards turn 4, they charge. We jump on board with Steffen Krumholz, who now finds himself ahead of Paul Smithhurst and is continued to charge after Adam Miles. And Krumholz has been gradually gaining as the race has gone on. He's been looking for opportunities, and Smithhurst is alongside him. Now, where is Smithhurst exactly? He's on the left, albeit obscured by the camera. As they come through, as the drivers had a bit of a lock up there. Meanwhile, Steffen Herrmann taking P2 back as they power their way up towards turn number 6. Into left-hander they go, but Smithhurst will have the potential for an inside runner. 6 as Krumholz goes a little bit deep. And as they make their way up the hill, you can hear him probably in your left ear cover. You've got headphones at the moment. But as Smithhurst looking for the move, we look to some more exterior cameras here to give you the perspective. Smithhurst on the outside of Krumholz up towards turn number 9. But as they come into the left-hander, he can't quite find it. And Jackson just behind as they head on through. And we're coming on down towards turn at number 10. I think this corner could definitely be a flashpoint on the final lap. But meanwhile, Neil Garner up the inside there of Adam Miles in the battle for P4. Miles defending on the outside to inside into 11. A very tricky hairpin into flying left-hander chicane type sequence. And as they make their way on through the long sweep at turns 11 and 12, well, now it's all going to be bear it up and grin it, ladies and gentlemen, because we head on to the final lap. It'll be the 12th one turned in this sprint race. And now this is where it becomes critical. Who will take the win at next lap around? As they head to the line, the white flag waves from Barney flag. It's Gordon Van den Bergen who leads going on to the final lap, but will he still be there come the end of it? That's the question as they go 3 wide into the opening corner. Here it's fireworks already quickly. Wade on the inside, he can't quite find the line. Meanwhile, Steffen Herrmann through the middle. He goes for the Moses manoeuvre. It sticks for now, but as they break the way into turn number 2, we can see there Gardner on the inside as well as Wade on the outside. Falls a little bit deep and as a result losing out slightly, but doesn't fall out of the pack as they make the way through 2. Down towards 3 now. Herrmann's absolutely gone for it here. He's got a 2.5 second gap in the run to 4, but it's not going to be enough. But you can see everybody behind trying to get themselves set up. Gone out of position. He normally likes the inside into 4. He's on the outside now, but I think Garner's going to try and go in on the outside on the brakes. Herrmann defends here as Garner goes deep. Vandenbergen on the inside, Wade on the outside. Vandenbergen back. Oh goodness me, it's a major knock between drivers, and Vandenbergen has been turned on around. We're not quite sure who the contact was with. I think it may have been with what was, excuse me, I believe it may have been with Paul Smithhurst, but we can't confirm that. We will try and get a replay back very shortly. But meanwhile, as I try to make the way on through, Steffen Herrmann here leading the race, and indeed that instant calls in the field to branch out slightly as they make the way down towards turn number 10. In fact, I think it was Miles who may have been in the contact with Vandenbergen and not Smithhurst. But either way, as they head in towards the final major corner here, Steffen Herrmann on the brakes. Meanwhile, Paul Smithhurst goes all in versus Kronos, gets P4, comes out the corner, but now with a do or die move there for Paul Smithhurst for P4. Steffen Herrmann comes out of 11. He's got an advantage of 3 tenths. He makes his way to the final corner and we'll be looking to bring home the win here. It's been a long time since we've seen him right up there, but he's played it right, and as he heads the line, the checkered flag gets ready to wave, but who will it be who takes it? I think he's done it, ladies and gentlemen. Steffen Herrmann takes the win by what is there, just a whisker, half a tenth if that, had a Neil Garner with Nathan Wade P3, Stephen Cromwell's P4, Paul Smithhurst P5, Adam Miles P6, Ryan Jackson P7, had Daniel Tubbs, Jeff Randall P9, and then Gordon Vandenbergen at P10 in a frustrating end to his day. JT Kopinen P11 ahead of AJ Campbell, Palanzeros at P13, and it will be Clark Williams who comes on around for P14. But we do try to get a quick replay of what exactly happened, and here it is. Hopefully we can carry the footage all the way through. But under braking here into the zone for Gordon Vandenbergen, I think it was contact with Adam Miles. Yes, there was contact between them, and that explains the story as we are forced to transition into the warm-up for our second race of the day. Well, as we have the 5-minute transition period, unfortunately we can't go back, but what we can do is recall the results from race number 1, and well, what an absolute thriller it was, and here are the results. Well, subject to stewards' inquiries, but we can see Steffen Herrmann there taking the win in our first race of the day in round 11 of the musical Money Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, as brought to you by Gone Skipping Racing for 2023 on the Premier Sim Racing platform, available only on PC, known as iRacing. And Herrmann ahead of Neil Garner, and in the end, in fact, it was only 400ths between the two privateers, with Nathan Wade a further 1.5 tenths off. Stephen Cromwell's at P4 there for Arto Motorsport, with Paul Smithhurst rounding out the top 5, and then Adam Miles at P6, but my goodness, Herrmann pulling it out the bag, and Adam Miles with that contact with Gordon Vandenbergen losing out dearly when he was the one to potentially watch out for on the final lap. Ryan Jackson P7 ahead of Daniel Tufts, with Jeff Randall P9 for Gone Skipping Racing, and Gordon Vandenbergen, the second racing driver, losing out severely and finishing at P10. But thankfully for him, it will mean that he's on reverse grid pole for the second race of the day, the round 12 feature that's coming up soon. Best of the rest in P11, JT Kopinen, the privateer, ahead of AJ Campbell for Arto Motorsport, and it's Arto Motorsport Blues at Pala Anzioso finished P13, ahead of Clark Williams, who after that early incident which took off his front wing in the run to turn it number 10 in between himself and was JT Kopinen, and also Pala Anzioso. For Williams, it was a pit stop that put him out of the running, but he still brought the car on home and has brought himself some key points. But that's our first race, ladies and gentlemen, and we still got one more to go. And let's give you a reminder of our schedule. We've had the sprint race, our 20-minute race, but now we do have the 40-minute feature of round number 12 coming up shortly here at the Phillip Island circuit in Australia. And well, as we get ready to go once again, so many key talking points with regards to that first race of the day, but the most critical one, of course, in the fact that incident at the end of the race, putting a couple of drivers out of contention for the win, and perhaps the most notable, I should say, at one being knocked out of contention was in particular Gordon Vandenbergen, who was turned around and a dismal way to end that race, but he has another opportunity to go all in for it. But as our drivers get themselves set here, and indeed not long left before we go racing once again, I suspect we may have an opportunity to get a quick word with Jeff Randall whilst he cools down after the first race of the day. And in fact, we do try to get the patch through to Jeff Randall in the car. And as we do try to patch through, Jeff, can you hear me?
Cool.
Oh, well, Jeff, what a thrilling race number one, and you found yourself a little bit off of the top 6 towards the end, but you had a bit of a battle with the man we're looking at the moment, Daniel Tufts, all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, we were actually working together really well just to try and get back on. And I mean, again, I just tagged myself down for yet another rookie error on a Friday night. Got a bit wobbly at the turn 1, and then that carried through into turn 2, and I just found myself running wide. What a bad move.
Oh, indeed. And before you made that mistake at turn at number 2, where you saw you take a bit of a scenic approach to the long left-hander, you found yourself battling inside the top. How was it out there in terms of being in that pack of 6 to 7 cars and really having to play a bit of NASCAR, or depending on your preference, also the Tour de France, and then picking the right time to be at the front?
Yeah, it's quite hard actually. If you're sort of anywhere from 4 backwards, it's really hard to make your way forwards because the draft sort of cancels itself out. So moving forward when you're 4th, 5th, and 6th is tricky. So being in 1st and 2nd and 3rd is the ideal place. I'll have another go in race 2.
Well, we do look forward to seeing how you get on in race number 2, and of course with your finishing position you'll be right up there on the grid. So what's your expectations for that opening lap?
Hopefully everyone will realise that it's 40 minutes and there's no panic, and that there's plenty of time just to jostle for positions. It will be a bit of a marathon, I think.
Well, we do look forward to seeing how you get on, Jeff, but we'll leave you to it and let yourself get prepared.
Thank you, Paul.
All the best.
Cheers, bye.
They're hearing there from Jeff Randall as he gets ready to go racing, ladies and gentlemen. And, well, as we heard there, a bit of a difficult first race of the day after that mistake, which proved quite costly, but still not too costly to put him out of the running, but instead demoted him to battling with Daniel Tufts. But the two of them working together in his own words, and they were making good ground, but just found themselves a little bit too far out of the hunt at the very end. But, of course, with the finishing position, he'll be starting on the second row of the grid for our second race. And, well, we are only now seconds away from going racing up once again, and it is going to be a 40-minute marathon, in the words of Jeff, in the fact it's double the duration, and with that all-important mandatory pit stop for fuel as well. And I think we could see a very slow opening stint while drivers are trying to pick as much fuel for one another. But the question is, who's going to come home on the win? Well, let's find out. So as our drivers make their way to the grid, this is how they'll line up for the second race of the day. Gordon van den Bergen will take reverse grid pole position there for Sickhead Racing, with Jeff Randall line up alongside him for Gone Skipping Racing. It's Daniel Tufts and Ryan Jackson who line up together on row 2, P3, P4, with Adam Miles and Paul Smith as P5, P6. Steffen Krummel's at P7 there, starts off our fourth row for Artel Motorsport, with Nathan Wade alongside in P8, and it's Neil Garner and Stefan Herrmann who complete the top 10 on the 5th row. JT Capino will be starting P11, joined by Artel Motorsport's AJ Campbell, and on the final row of the grid, it will be Paolo Anzioso for Artel Motorsport Blue and the privateer of Clark Williams. It's a small grid, but again, whilst the grid may be small, and indeed quantity does not necessarily mean quality, and with the drivers we do have, we're seeing absolutely exceptional quality here today as we go on racing, and as we do look to our chopper cam at the moment, as it's, in fact, we look to our blimp camera, we should say, as it sits over the circuit. It's made its way a little bit further around now. It's made its way down towards turn number 2. The grid is currently still being set here for the purposes of going racing, ladies and gentlemen, and well, we are only moments away now from taking to the circuit anger for the second time. The field is almost complete, and it's a beautiful day here, and we'll to put you in the figure with regards to the weather, it is 22 degrees centigrade on track, it's 20 degrees centigrade ambient, and that does mean it's pleasant. We've got the wind blowing as well. It's a nice day in southeast Australia, and as our drivers get ready to go, we look to this man right down the front, Gordon van den Bergen, who gets ready to go once again. We're now only 1 or 2 drivers short of making the grid, and well, once Adam Miles takes to it, we await the lights. We're approximately 10 seconds away from the lights out procedure, ladies and gentlemen. Many of you are tuning in. It's great to see you all, including Neil Garner and also Cam SR 1997. But now we await the lights. One red light, 2 red lights, 3 red lights, 4 red lights, 5 red lights. And it's lights out and away we go for the round 12 feature race here at Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit in Australia as Gordon van den Bergen leads away, and as they make their way down towards turn number 1, it's a good start from our drivers on the front row, with Daniel Tufts also tucking on in, but as they come on down towards the opening lift-off and coast zone, well, we can see Nathan Wood immediately looking for them. Nathan Wade, we should say, making the way up the inside into turn number 1 and down onto the brakes, but as he does here, immediately a response from a couple of drivers in front, as they all make the way in front. I think Wade being overly cautious here in order to make sure he just takes his time and saves the fuel in the car. He doesn't want to end up in the first lap instant. Nobody does as they make the way down towards turn number 4. Van den Bergen on the outside versus Jeff Randall on the inside as they transition into the braking zone for the hairpin. It will be Randall and Van den Bergen who leads come the exit of the corner. Well, nobody arguably wants to be the leader in this group. They all want to be behind the leader to save as much fuel as possible. For somebody who wants to be the leader, it's still 2 wide on corner exit. It's going to be Randall on the inside into turn number 6. 2 by 2 they all go. You'd imagine this was a very fast formation lap, but you'd be wrong there. They are racing as they make their way out of turn 6 and in towards turn number 9. But such is the tenacity of our drivers right now. They're all vying to be the one driver behind the leader, and will for the leaders. And they're squaring off as they make their way up the hill and in towards the braking zone for turn number 9 shortly as they come on through the left-hander. It's Randall continues to lead Daniel Tufts side by side with Jackson as they come on through, and well, Jackson's made some early ground, but as they come down into the braking zone here, this will be the first crunch point under braking. And look at Adam Miles there defending hard versus Paul Smithers, and Smithers just tucks back in and recognises there's no need to push it as they make their way through 11 and down towards turn number 12, but further towards the back of the field. We've got a bit of a battle between the Arton Motorsport machines there of always Campbell and Anzioso, and Clark Williams trying to go around the outside of Campbell as they come through turn 12. On the apex there, Campbell defending, but he's a compromise on corner exit. He can't carry all the speed, and as they make the way down, it's going to be Wes Williams who gets ahead in the run to 1. But after one lap, it is going to be Van den Bergen who leads this race ahead of Jeff Randall P2. When it's there, Daniel Tufts P3 ahead of Jackson P4, Miles P5 ahead of Smithers P6, and it's Crimmels, Garner and Herrmann and Wes Wade to complete the top 10. Behind them, best the rest is JT Kapinan as Nathan Wade taking a very slow approach to this race, staying at the back of the top 10. We can see Kapinan there bringing up the rear, as meanwhile Williams goes a little bit sideways there, oversteer kicks, and he collects the car and prevents it from going to the grass. Just about brilliant catch there from Clark Williams, but that could have been so much worse. But then again, that goes to show the dexterity of the driver and credit to his racing ability. In terms of the catch, he brings it back up to speed, but meanwhile in the run to turn number 4 here and through the apex they go of the hairpin. Randall now dropping back to P3 with what is there, Jackson on his outside come turn number 6, and well, meanwhile Daniel Tufts just waiting, and we can see so many a driver here. I think they all do have their racing heads on, but the inner spirit animal inside them is saying no, you've got to save fuel in order to jump the other drivers in the pits. And I think whoever can save the utmost here, I think Nathan Wade is going to be the biggest one to watch. They may find themselves jumping ahead of this group, and if they come out 2 seconds ahead of the pack come the end of the pit stops, well, that 2 seconds will be enough to keep them safe if they've got the pace to run away, because the tow on these Skip Barber Formula 2000s, of course, does extend to about 1.8 seconds. You feel a very light tow, and it starts to really increase below a second, particularly 7/10 and lower, and that's what our drivers want to do. They want to get as much gap as possible, and to do so it will be on strategy. But as they make the way through 11 and down towards 12, Wade staying there in P10 with JT Kapinan behind him. We jump on board here with number 719 driver who's starting to get approximately 7/10 a second between himself and Anzioso and P12. So Kapinan right at the back of the long snake train at the moment as they all weave their way down towards turn number 1 once again and head in towards the braking zone here. Well, the lift-off zone, we should say, that's how they retard the car. They don't need to use the brake pedal, it's just lift off the throttle and turn on in, and the friction and the air resistance will do the rest. Once they come on through, little drift there from what is Crimmels to the outsider too. I think simply trying to shave off a bit of speed here and save some fuel. Kapinan just waiting there in return, and Wade moves to P9, but coming on down and up towards turns 3 and 4 they go, using all the way from the circuit as well, so using a lot of momentum on the car as they head up toward turn number 4. But as they head in towards the next braking zone, we can see then the distant camera shot, the sweep of the terrain as we see Wade looking around the outside here of Herrmann. Of course, Herrmann bringing on home in race number 1. He this time now not trying to push too hard early on. I think Steffen Herrmann trying to spring us all another surprise in the second race of the day. As Neil Garner just in front of us, they come through the left-hander and up they go. But meanwhile, as they make the way on around, I can tell Anzioso and Campbell still battling for P12, and they are starting to pick time off of one another, and that may just force them out of contention as we go deeper into this race. And Clark Williams 3 seconds off the leaders, or the lead pack we should say. It's the top 13, and then Williams at this time, really. It's a bit unfortunate for Williams with that slight mistake, but you never know, he may be able to catch up as they come down towards turn number 10. Onto the brakes they go, and Herrmann there looking on the inside versus Steffen, trying to keep his counterpart at bay as they make the way through turn at number 11. But I think the Arto Motorsport driver is trying to get a message through to Herrmann, which is, come on, we can pick up the pace a little bit, or just let me go and don't worry about my race. But as they make the way on down the round, well, here is Gordon van den Bergen, your leader, as he now heads on to what for him is lap number 4 in anger. We've only completed 5 minutes, we've still got plenty of time to go, but this gives you a figure, of course, now we really are in the marathon race as they make the way in towards the right-hander of one. And Smith has taken a little bit of a peek up the inside there. And of course, what can they do in these snows? They're doing a lot of fuel saving, but you may be wondering, what can our drivers do to also gain themselves an advantage? Well, you can take little peeks at other drivers. You can try to get in the head of the driver in front. You make them think you might be going for an unexpected move. Of course, all of these drivers are seasoned veterans of the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy Series, and they'll all know each other very well. There's not a driver who doesn't know one another on the grid. So they're all friends off the circuit, but foes and rivals on the circuit. Smithhurst there having a bit of liberal use of the turn 3 apex curve as he breaks his way into turn number 4, but you can make these little moves that try to unsettle the driver in front, and Tufts there just giving the space to Smithhurst and letting him go. And perhaps if you unsettle the driver in front enough, they may have a mistake that sees them drop to the back of the pack or completely off circuit. We did see a mistake earlier, of course, from Jeff Randall in the first race today, so mistakes do happen, but they are few and far between. But the concentration levels here will be so high from driver to driver in the fact they are looking to manage the amount of fuel they take, because of course every litre they save now, it saves them time in the pits, and also they have to do the calculations when the pit stops start in terms of, do they take maximum fuel, the fuel they would take in order to get to the end of the race unscaled on fuel capacity at full pelt, or do they underfuel the car expecting to fall into the slipstream of another driver? And well, when they factor that in, of course, we did see Adam Miles with one of the shortest pit stops at Summit Point, and he managed to lead the race home despite the fact he had to fuel save towards the end, particularly on the final lap. But Miles bought himself enough time in the pits, and everybody else was battling around him, and that gave him the opportunity. And of course, that is another thing as well. You may underfuel, and that means you may have to fuel save on the last 2 laps. And if you've got that worked out and you can give yourself a 4-second advantage in the lead come the end of the pit stops, then it's all worth it. So a lot of mathematics going through the heads of our drivers. Some of them will have spotters and team managers who are working for them. Some of them all by themselves, they're trying to figure out exactly what the formula will be to success. But either way, it's thrilling in the fact that at any moment this could kick off. And as they come through turn in number 2, all behind Steffen Krumholz there, still balanced side by side with Steffen Herrmann. And will these two picking off time, and Capino and Anziosa have called up. AJ Campbell still a second off of this. And then we do see that Clark Williams is gaining. I think Williams is being given an opportunity here to push on. I think there's so much full same going on in the top group that Williams not really too heavily compounded by his mistake earlier, and he's going to take inspiration, but he'll also use a lot of fuel to close up at the rate he's going at the moment, because the race pace at the moment, the fastest man on circuit is in fact this man of Clark Williams. You wouldn't believe it, of course, given the fact he didn't qualify too well, but he's charging on through here. He wants to close up to the pack, and he'll use all the fuel he can in order to do it. And indeed, the 98 car roars on as he makes his way out to turn number 6. He's now only 2.5 seconds away, but as they make the way up towards turn number 9, meanwhile JT Kapinen on the outside there versus always Krumholz coming on through the long left-hander. Herrmann keeping him back, and Krumholz backs off for a brief moment, but meanwhile right in the middle of the pack we look to Neil Gardner in P5, and all the New Zealander here coming up the hill towards turn at number 11 and keeping it cool and not trying to put too much pressure on. And I think he's just waiting to see whether he can break away with a pack of drivers. Perhaps they'll be able to separate the group. Jeff Randall following in the wheel tracks of Gardner and following him like it's a railroad in terms of making sure to take all of that slipstream, the dirty air through the corners, but of course the blast through the toe down the straight, and it gains a couple of miles an hour, and that means it bleeds the speed as we see more bobbing and weaving on the start and finish straights. They're all trying to disrupt one another. They all know at the front that the drivers behind are being given the golden opportunity to save that fuel. And as they come on to the next lap, Van den Bergen right now is your leader, and we have seen Van den Bergen when he's up front, he doesn't normally mind leading the race. He does seem to find a way quite comfortably of being able to keep the fuel in the car, as Clark Williams sets the fastest lap of the race, a 46.69 to the nearest hundredth. And as they hunt down towards turn at number 3, well, meanwhile Ryan Jackson here on the inside versus Daniel Tufts. Tufts here trying to go outside, meanwhile Gardner trying to make it 3 wide. I think if Gardner's going to do it, he's going to go very late on the brakes here into the hairpin. He looks for it, and well, the camera a little bit deceptive there, and Gardner does get alongside of the pair, but Tufts in return carries all the speed on through, and it's going to be Jackson versus Wade. Gardner did clear Jackson, with Jackson been on that outside line from the 3 wide. And as they head for return number 6, Wade just rocks in behind. Meanwhile, Adam Miles now trying to put a bit of pressure on as he heads up the hill versus Wade. And of course, Wade the man to be, but at the same time, also the man who doesn't want to get it wrong, and he just wants to keep his cool to maintain that championship advantage. And with the fact that the first win of the day went to Steffen Herrmann, Wade will not be too perplexed by that, in the fact when it does mean his major rivals in the championship have not gained key points. But meanwhile, they break their way down. This time we've got a lock-up from a driver just in front of Miles. I believe that was a lock-up for what's Neil Gardner. And of course, quite easy to lock up the brakes in these Skip Barber Formula machines as they head down towards turn at number 12 once again to complete the lap. But if you're Gordon Mundenbergen at this point, it's be right on board the gearbox of the aforementioned race leader from Second Racing. All you can think about at this time is managing at your pace and sticking to your fuel saving. You're never going to be able to do the same fuel saving as the driver behind. He'll be lifting and coasting from corner to corner in your toe, but you can focus on your strategy and potentially look to pit early or a bit as late as possible. As meanwhile, Neil Gardner there up the inside. They're going to go too wide into the opening corner. It's going to be Gardner up the inside there of Smithhurst, and it's going to be Jackson on the inside of Tufts. And we're in particular with that battle between Tufts and Jackson as they come through. Tufts goes a little bit deep of apex there, and Jackson has to respond by giving more room. But as they come on out, they survive the corner. Wade cuts up the inside of Jackson, heading up towards turn number 3. It may all be 0 for 0 here as they make their way up towards the hairpin. In fact, Wade backing off slightly, but holds the place out of Jackson today. Backs to pick the inside, then swings back to the outside of the racing line. Jackson has to duck to the inside. It gets very close under braking, but everybody surviving the corners there this time around. I think a lot of drivers trying to figure out where they want to be in this pack. And in terms of when we can expect the first pit stops here, we've seen pit stops as early at some circuits. At Summit Point, we saw pit stops in the 13th minute of racing, so we could see a driver to duck into the pit, albeit I suspect most of our drivers here will not pit unless they see somebody else pit, because of the fact the toe is so powerful here at the Phillips GP circuit, and therefore you do not want to, and the Phillip Island GP circuit, you do not want to essentially fall out of toe, because you gain clear air on circuit, there's no question about that, but what you gain in clear air, you lose in straight line speed from corner to corner and straight to straight. But as our drivers make their way out to turn number 10, we look back to JT Kopinen, who falls back behind Steffen Krimmels in the battle for P10. Kopinen here, the finishman, just staying patient and looking for an opportunity to move on through. Later on, as we see into the pit lane, that's Jeff Randall. And Randall, we're going for the first pit stop of all. And well, this is a surprise. And I wonder what the Gonskipping Racing driver has in mind here. He'll feel that the undercut can deliver. But I think everybody else right now is thinking, okay, Randall's gone in. Will there be a reaction from anybody else, or do I need to react to it? But Randall will be up by his lonesome. But does he think he can just fill the car up for maximum fuel? And that'll be enough to get him to the end of the race if he goes full attack. And that could be key. Now, what do we mean by that, of course? Well, imagine if Randall's worked it out at the moment that for the remainder of the race, if he's got the tank of fuel, he does not have to worry about fuel saving anymore, then every lap he puts in once he exits the pit lane will effectively be for him a qualifying lap. Well, that's the target he's got to go for. And when you piece that together, it means this pack of drivers, whilst they're fuel saving, and to put it in perspective, as they break their way down to turn number 4, and that's Smithhurst on the inside of Oddenbergen for the lead of the race, with Wes Garner also trying to come through to make it a 2-for-1 special at the inside of the previous race leader. Going to be side by side up towards turn number 6. We'll come back to that full with regards to Randall's strategy shortly. But in fact, we have an opportunity now as Adam Miles side by side with Tufts. And well, who's going to back out here? I think it's going to be close between the turn all the way from 6 up towards 9. Tufts does get his nose ahead. Miles still there, however, on the outside to inside. But Jackson now starting to get into the mix as he looks around the outside of Miles. So Tufts will clear. Jackson will still be there. I think Jackson's also got to think about backing out soon. I don't think there's a way he can make this work into the downhill braking zone, although he could prove us wrong. 3 wide under braking there. That's going through the 7-4 for Steffen Krimmels, but he stops it in time. I think he was just looking to come out the toe to try and bleed some of the speed off the car. And as they make their way down for 11, will they all go line astern again? But coming back to the point before we forget it about Jeff Randall, as we do see an immediate reaction from Neil Garner and Adam Miles, and this is what we're going to come on to. The fact that right now, if you're in the lead pack, you're fuel saving, and you're running at least a second off of your optimum pace. Randall, meanwhile, if he's able to put in qualifying laps, he will be gaining a second every time. And Garner and Miles both coming on in here. So I think it will be about reacting to Randall and Garner and Miles' pit stops. And once they all come on through, meanwhile, Clark Williams looking up the inside here versus where's AJ Campbell. as he comes through turn number 1, and will Williams has expended a lot of fuel to close on up, and he may be able to make this work now as he comes on through. We've got a drift of a car in front, albeit Campbell's going to go back on the inside here for what is turn number 2 in this battle, and coming on down towards turn number 4, it's going to be side by side all the way on through. In fact, they power the way on down, and we have got the onboard here with Williams. He does have Campbell on the left of your pitch. You can just see Campbell creeping into the shot there. Onto the brakes he goes, and Williams going all in, but Campbell's still there as they make the way on around, and he does get covered off in the end, does Williams. He creeps ahead, and Campbell decides to back out as they come into turn number 6, or does he? No, he doesn't in fact. Campbell goes in, Williams going a little bit deep, still giving him the space as they make the way up the hill towards turn number 9. Still too wide all the way in the battle for the final spot inside the top 10 on track. And it's going to be Campbell on the outside here through turn number 8. That is going to be a slower line. We see it in catch our number of drivers in battling, and Williams will finally be able to settle this battle on down. Meanwhile, we look from them back up to Nathan Wade. And your race leader, he's taken over recently from Paul Smithers, and as they make the way up through turn number 11, I suspect we're going to see a couple more drivers peel off into the pit lane very shortly, and we are keeping an eye on the lap times for Miles, Gardner and Randall, with Randall coming out directly behind Gardner and Miles. In fact, a lot of drivers now into the pits. That's Wade, Smithers, Jackson and Grimmiles as they all make the way, and also AJ Cameron, Palanzioso. So we have had 6 drivers coming in, so it's only the other half of the lead pack that now need to come on in, and they'll likely come in at the end of the next lap, and that will mean for the remainder of the race we're essentially going to have just shy of 20 minutes where it's going to be flat out. Well, again, presuming everyone's got enough fuel. If not, and in fact Jeff Randall with the shortest pit stop of the 3 who pitted first, only 12 seconds versus 14 for Neil Gardner and 13 for Adam Miles as round up to nearest second. And meanwhile Daniel Tafts, as he makes his way down through turn 2 and up towards 3 and 4 he goes. The privateer going a bit deep on the exit of 2. That's going to give Gordon van den Bergen all the time he needs. Meanwhile, coming out the pit lane, we look here to Adam Miles, and Miles behind Wade, but interestingly ahead of Neil Gardner. So Nathan Wade with a 12.5 second stop. Jeff Randall's been the shortest stop of them all, and he's jumped up to P9 as they all factor on out. But we are still waiting to see where everybody fits into this order as they come through the left-hander turn at number 2 and down towards 3-4 they go, and roaring on through the corners here. Everybody just waiting at the moment and trying to pick the right time to go for those opportunistic moves, but it's going to be all about how the field all comes back together once those final pit stops are done. Speaking of which, here are your race leaders yet to pit, and it's going to be Tufts versus Van den Bergen into turn at number 9. Side by side they go over the rise, and then they fall into 10. Tufts still there on the inside for 10. He goes for it, covers off the position. Nice return move there from Daniel Tufts. I think this fighting is starting to cost them, for as they make the way through 11, will we see either of them peel off into the pit lane? I think Tufts may be considering it here. He does, he comes down on pit lane as he makes his way on in. Meanwhile, the top 4 in fact stay out. So it will be Tufts who adds his name to the list of drivers who have fitted. But meanwhile, Van den Bergen, Herrmann, Capina and Williams all stay out there and carry on for at least one more lap. And speaking of Herrmann versus Van den Bergen, as they make the way towards turn number 1, it's now going to be Herrmann who looks to move up the inside here under braking. Can he find it, however? Well, he's going to get it done, but I think they really now need to focus on just simply working together here and saving the fuel to go along as they head in towards turn number 2. And we're speaking of fuel going into a car, we look to Daniel Tufts here as he's parked up in the pit lane, waiting to go. He leaves his pit box. In fact, we look to the blimp camera as he makes way through, and you'll see just above him, that's the lead pack that's pitted coming through. That's Nathan Wade, Miles and Gardner. Tufts will come on out. He'll come out alongside where's there Jeff Randall, with Grimmel's also going on through, so that's the difference at the end. I think Tufts has lost some race time, but he's still with the pack as they make the way up towards turn number 2. And in fact, as they do, here is Nathan Wade versus Miles, and also behind him there is Neil Gardner, and these 3 are going to be, I suspect, your de facto race leaders once the top 4 in this race have come into the pit, and they are trying to break away from Randall, Crimmels and Tufts, albeit to do so they need to gain approximately 3 more attempts and keep that gap consistent, if not cause it to break open a little bit more, because at the moment they are almost there of breaking away and making this a 3-way pack for the lead come the end of the race. And we have still got just over half the race to go here in the feature at Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit as they make the way on around and up towards turn number 9. But as they come on through, what about our race leaders? Do any of them peel off into the pit lane on this time? Well, you can see Herrmann Herrmann there staying over to the right. He does come and he goes in late. I think he tried to throw a dummy there, but Wim goes von den Bergen. But meanwhile, to lead his first lap of the day, and in fact, I think this is the first time he's led a lap this season. JT Kapinen finds himself in the lead, and he's bringing on Wim Clark Williams, who's staying with him as they make their way towards turn number 1. Well, it's a bit of an unusual position here for the 719 driver. I think he's going to revel in it and relish it for as long as he can as he comes into the right-hander of the opening corner. And Clark Williams, I think, also a bit buoyant. He's been able to catch back up to the group. But meanwhile, looking from them to what is Adam Miles, he makes his way out of the final corner. It's a long pit lane here, and a lot of time does get spent in the pits. It's approximately a 39 to 41 second pit stop on average. And as Miles comes on through, he will take what is the lead of this race, as we're to understand at least the drivers who have pitted so far, as he makes his way into the opening corner. And meanwhile, coming out of the pit lane, that's Steffen Herrmann. He comes out ahead of Randall and Krimmels, and Randall out the inside there of Krimmels, with Tufts coming through as well. So it does look as though, again, certain drivers making this work either on an undercut or an overcut relative to their peers. And Steffen Herrmann making his way into the second pack, but that lead pack has gone. In fact, they are 2.5 seconds up the road. That will mean now that for Wiz Herrmann, Randall, Tufts and Krimmels, they will need to push on in order to close that gap back up, because they will no longer be getting the distant draft. So that top 3 could be your potential 3 winners of this race. But as they make the way into turn at number 4, of course, the full process here will be for Randall and company. Well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And as they make the way up towards turn at number 6, they'll all try to work together once they've established some sort of norm. Or will they? Will they be able to put aside their rivalries in order to work for the greater goal in their mind of bringing home the race win, or at least a spot on the podium? Or the inner racer does take over. Of course, we mentioned it earlier. It's about separating the intelligent animal of what is thinking ahead in terms of strategy versus the beast of racing passion. But as they make their way through at turn at number 9, meanwhile we look back to Paul Smithhurst. In fact, we've lost Paul Smithhurst for a brief moment. I think we have now got him back. And there was a bit of a connectivity issue there for the number 77 driver. He's tucked in behind Jackson as they come through 10 into 11. Nothing between the two. JT Kapinen comes on in, and meanwhile, to lead his first ever lap of racing this season, and I believe in his debut, Clark Williams makes his way on down through turn at number 2. The number 98 driver here definitely enjoying what is a stronger race 2 of the day after difficulties race 1, and he's decided to go as long as possible. I think he's going to just simply see whether by staying out there for so long he can avoid some potential drama and gain some place as a result. And who can blame him, to be fair? He's going all for it. He's got nothing to lose, and well, he's going to lead a lap today as a minimum as he makes his way through turn at number 4. But as he does, we look back to the lead strategic pack. Well, in fact, the second strategic pack, we should say, on with Daniel Tufts and Steffen Herrmann, who are sandwiched in between Randall and Krimmels. They continue to fight here, and well, Krimmels taking a little bit of peek there on the exit, where it's turn at number 2. Up towards 4 they go, and as they do, powering the way on around, well, no change at the moment between them as they head on to the brakes, albeit it will be Tufts who defends ever to Krimmels. So he is now having to start to get his elbows out a little bit here, Tufts, in order to maintain his place in this pack, with Smithhurst and was also Jackson closing up as well. So it's a 6-way fight effectively now for is at P5, but meanwhile the win for the battle for P2 overall, and that is between, of course, Wade, Miles and Gardner. That's a 3-way fight, so it is a large pack chasing after a small lead pack, and therefore the top 3 will be mindful. They can't really afford to fight one another too much as Clark Williams makes his way into the pit lane. As I look at my commentator booth window, he decides enough's enough and he's got to come on in. As we look to the leaders here, or the drivers will inherit the lead when they make the way on around towards turn number 1. It'll be Nathan Wade in particular, and well, Wade, of course, we're just missing out on the podium in the first race of the day, and now looking to definitely try and get the win here in the second race. Of course, he's very eager to take a win. It's been some time since we've seen him staying on the top step. We've only 1 win this season so far, but plenty of podiums, 8 podiums in all. And as he makes his way across the timeline, it's going to be side by side with Adam Miles. And Miles will get a nose ahead here as they head in towards the opening lift and coast zone. But in return, it's going to be a bit of a battle in for P4 here versus Herrmann and Tufts. Onto the run they go. And as they do, Tufts up the inside. Herrmann backing off there, but cuts back in as they make their way up towards turn at number 2. We have heard there's been a bit of an incident for AJ Campbell. He's had a bit of a moment out on the circuit that's cost him dear. Meanwhile, Clark Williams re-emerges P13 off camera. And as we look here to drivers make their way down towards turn number 4, where Smithhurst up the inside of Jackson for a brief moment. Gordon van der Bergen dropping back to P10. They also do have closing up behind them gradually what is the run of Palazioso, and Anzioso, in fact, you can see that in the pack behind. Meanwhile, contact now, I believe, between the 744 of what is Steffen Krummels and Paul Smithhurst. I'm not 100% sure on exactly what triggered that off, but it's Krummels who has fallen a victim to it as a result, and now has lost out quite significantly. We'll try and get a look back at what exactly happened there very shortly for your reference, but it did look a little bit nip and tuck there between the drivers as they made the way on around. But I think now some tempers are starting to get a little bit hot as we head into the final 15 minutes of racing here in the first half of the season. And as they come up through turn number 9, we do have an opportunity to take a quick look back at exactly what happened. As they made the way down through turn number 2 and in towards 3. We're going to look at this from Ryan Jackson's perspective. In fact, into turn number 4 they went, and as they did, a bit of contact there between Smithhurst and what appeared to be Krummels on the corner, and Jackson, as he came off the corner, then deciding to stay to the outside and just back out this move into turn number 6 and give himself the opportunity later in the race. But as we look back to live pictures, that's Clock Williams who's ended up in the wall there in a nasty shunt. We're not quite sure how that's happened. We'll try and understand shortly. But meanwhile, as they head on down towards turn number 1 on the lead lap, Nathan Wade here, your leader, once again back ahead of Adam Miles. And of course, these two, it was the battle and strategy that Miles won at Summit Point in the last feature. And now it's Wade who seems to be one step ahead here. Albeit the two of them very even on pace, both taking very similar pit times. 12.5 seconds for Wade, meanwhile 12.9 for Miles, so it's 4 attempts between them in the pit lane. And could that translate into something else entirely? Well, I think given the amount of fuel saving that Wade was doing compared to most on that opening stint, they should be relatively even on fuel as they head down towards turn number 4. In this top 3 continue to run the pace away from the rest of the field. They are lapping in the low to mid 46s. Meanwhile, I can tell you the battle from P4 back to P11 is running in the high 46s, low 47s, and that's where the gap is coming from. But as we do see Wade making his way up towards turn at number 9, we do look from him back to Paul Smithhurst, who in P4 at the moment find himself under pressure really to try and lead this pack up towards Gardner and company. But with that gap 4 seconds here, I think it is going to be a bridge too far, and instead now his focus is that P4 is going to be the best he can get, and he's got to try and hold on to it for as long as he can. Meanwhile, Herrmann looking on the outside to cover off what is there, the charge of Krummels under braking into turn number 10. Krummels throwing a dummy there to the inside. He went from outside to inside as quickly as he could. Couldn't quite find the momentum under braking to get the move underway, but Krummels getting very feisty behind. Meanwhile, Ryan Jackson still tucked it behind Jeff Randall, and Will Jackson playing a long game here, I think, with the fact that he did have one of the longest pit stops of this group, 14.5 seconds, not as long as Gordon van der Bergen, 16.5 seconds, but coming close by comparison with some. I think Jackson right now maybe doing the last little bits of fuel saving that he perhaps needs, where he can absolutely gun it on the throttle. And will he be able to find a way to break on through? Well, we'll have to see. As meanwhile, 3 wide into turn 1 soon becomes lying astern as they exit the corner, or does it? Krummels around the outside, holds the P4 position. Meanwhile, Steffen Herrmann in the middle of the road, got a bit of grass being kicked up there by one is Paul Smithhurst on the inside. He just catches the car in time as they come down through turn number 2, but everybody now really started to run on the ragged edge of adhesion. And as they come up towards the next braking zone, in towards turn 4 shortly, well, I can imagine now everybody trying to pick their place to make the move and then gain even more as they can, because time is running out in the race. And here we're not quite in that crunch moment at the moment in terms of when you've only got 5 minutes left. That's when we really do start to see the bare knuckle moments occur, but we are getting closer and closer to it. I think some drivers starting to tease out. One of them, Ryan Jackson, he's already moved 2 places over the last couple of corners, and he is the one I think you need to watch out for in this battle for P4, because I think right now he's running on a machine that can be run at 100%. Much more comfortably compared to his peers, given the fuel available to him. But whilst we do have a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen, we have got a replay of Clark Williams' incident coming up, and let's take a look. So at the time, running towards the rear of the field and making his way through turn number 9, carrying a bit too much speed then as he tried to catch the car onto the grass, onto the gravel, and in the end a passenger and a knock to the tyre barrier, collapsing the suspension on the front left, and that was his race, all unfortunately said and done. And in fact, we have had confirmation that the engineers are not able to repair Clark Williams' car, and he has become our first retirement of the day. But as we've gone from 14 participants who started on the grid to 13 still running with just over 10 minutes to go, it's Adam Miles on your live pictures who leads alongside Nathan Wade. Albeit I say that, and then Wade jumps into lead almost as if on cue. And will these two exchange the places with Neil Garner just watching behind 4/10 off. And then you do have in P4 with Steffen Herrmann and Ryan Jackson battling hard. And Jackson trying to get to the head of this group. And Jackson now, I think, being given the hurry-up order by the team in the fact that he wants to try and get to the head and then break away if he can. He's got Paul Smithhurst behind him in P5. And then Steffen Herrmann P6 and Daniel Tubbs with Stephen Crummels, Jeff Randall completing the run of P9. And in fact, Gordon Vandenberg has dropped off this group. He's in P10 with JT Capino immediately behind. We stay here focused on this battle as it's free wide into turn number 4. Herrmann on the outside. It's going to get very close there as Jackson finds himself right in the middle with nowhere to go. Daniel Tubbs backs out to be fair to Tubbs. But meanwhile, Smithhurst on the inside round to outside of turn number 6. Also trying to test the waters as they make their way through the corners. But all three drivers there surviving it. But indeed, those three wides, they're going to get ever more dicey as the fuel comes down. Indeed, the cars get ever lighter and that rear end starts to slide ever more. And of course, the key to a fast Skip Barber Formula 2000 is to have the loose rear end on the car, because it just gives you so much natural rotation from corner to corner, whether it be a low or high speed or somewhere in between. But coming on down the hill, we jump on board with Daniel Tubbs as he makes his way through turn number 10 and up towards 11 he goes. As he comes through the left-hander with the number 34 driver tucked in behind Jackson and thinking about what he can do now to try and make this move count. What I think here is he just runs in behind. It's going to be more about holding it off Smithhurst for the time being and then looking for that opportunity at the end as it's an upshift to top gear. And we can see Jackson looking down the inside here versus Herrmann, and will really squeezing Herrmann to the outside. Whoa, Tubbs getting the overspeed now. Thinking about it, being the end, lifts off completely and just lets the car coasting in as meanwhile Smithhurst takes a look around the outside, backs out of it there. No, there's not space to do it, but as they come up towards turn number 2, onto the brakes they go. Steffen Herrmann now holds firm. Tubbs turns on in, he cuts back into the line, and meanwhile Smithhurst is just behind waiting on all this. And in fact, as we look back here to where it's Tubbs, you can see that Smithhurst on the right of your picture as they make the way up towards turn number 4. And will Smithhurst aim to play the patience game? So it's Crummels. They both want this place off of Tubbs, but they know it's not the right time to pounce. As meanwhile, Crummels looks up the inside there, goes off the racing line. It's a tap to the rear of Tubbs. By Smithhurst there, Smithhurst gets it wrong, and Crummels and then looks up the inside in return. And as they exit out the corner, where it's going to be Smithhurst who falls back to the inside into turn 6, Tubbs goes a little bit deep, and meanwhile Crummels just waits there and does not pounce on the opportunity. I think worrying about the fact they start fighting now, they'll let the battle for P4 run away and it'll become their battle for P6 instead as they make the way up through turns 7 into 8 and 9 and coming in to the long left-hander of turn number 9 at the moment. Definitely now I think some tight arms and legs kicking in as well, and that could lead to some mistakes. But meanwhile in the battle for P10 just behind is JT Capino, who is ahead of Gordon Vandenbergen with Pala Anzioso also there in the mix. And as they come through turn at number 10 in towards 11 and 12 they go. Well, for these three, they'll be looking to try and get a little bit closer to Jeff Randall to give themselves an opportunity to go charging after what would be a possibility of a top 5 finish if Lady Luck should run their way and they're able to time their strikes at the right point in the final couple of laps. But that gap still needs to be brought on down. And for now, they'll be exchanging the place of Vandenbergen. Looking around the outside here of JT Capino in the run down towards turn number 1. Will either of them back out, or will they go too wide into the corner? Well, we're about to find out. And Capino, in fact, backs out then, lets Vandenbergen take the initiative. As they head through the long right hand, and meanwhile we look back up to your leaders and we have an opportunity to take a quick sip of water. And heading on through at turn number 3 then, Adam Miles, your leader at this point in time. And with Nathan Wade and Neil Garner staying right there with him, albeit I think becoming a bit more interested in battling one another over the last couple of laps. And this could give Miles a little bit of room to think about how he's going to set up the last couple of laps. Meanwhile, we can see in that battle for P4, Herrmann back up the inside there of Tufts through the right-hander. And well, these guys I don't think have any moment to think about where they're going to be in this pack come the end. I think given the bustling nature of this battle for P4, everybody right now are right on the edge in terms of just wanting to get in and be in the ultimate position. But coming up towards turn number 9, a bit of a run wide there, I believe, for what is Jackson's. Meanwhile, Randall takes a little bit of a peek to the inside into turn at number 8 versus Boy Smith first, but the door was always going to shut there, and I think just trying to see what the art of possible could be, as meanwhile drifting a little bit deep there, Tufts, but he'll defend into turn number 10 on the run back, and onto the brakes they go. Line astern still. The gap between this group and then the leaders now up to almost 6 seconds. Such is the way they've been battling and the fact they've been moving off pace as a result of it. And as they come down for 11 into 12, the top three by comparison, yes, they've had their place exchanges, but they've been working together and they've been setting themselves up for a battle for the win at come the final 5 minutes. Speaking of which, we're almost at the 5-minute remaining mark now, and this is where I think we will now start to see the gloves come off and drivers really get the elbows out, as Randall immediately looking up the inside here versus Smith into turn 1. And I think it's maybe the last time it's going to be by mutual agreement they're swapping places. I think the next time around both drivers will then start to entrench and dig on in, as there's a bit of contact there between the two drivers of Wes Herrmann, and I believe that was contact. Oh goodness me, it's a big knock to what is there, the Arto Motorsport machine of Steffen Krumholz, and it's all gone wrong for Steffen Herrmann, and what is it, Steffen Krumholz immediately as Krumholz had to be towed to the pits. Steffen Herrmann drops down to what is P9 with JT Kapinen capitalising, and there, as soon as we say with 5 minutes to go, it's all going to kick off. It does indeed on your screens, ladies and gentlemen, and let's take a look back on what exactly happened there to Steffen Herrmann. It did look as though things went a little bit wide, but I think there was also some slight contact, and that may have just set off a bit of a chain reaction. Well, as we take a look here then to what is Steffen Herrmann, as he made his way in, score with right on board with the pro tip, battling side by side with Ryan Jackson at the front of this battle for P4. And as they made their way into the right hander, Herrmann comes in, Jackson takes the line, and then I think this is where, in fact, Herrmann may have just gone a bit deep there and trying to recover the car. Well, in fact, this was on the previous lap. We do apologise. We seem to be 1 lap out of the sequence. In fact, we will now get the proper lap where this did occur. In fact, here we go. As we do look to what is Steffen Herrmann again this time, and well, making his way on down in the run. He was side by side again with Jackson under rotation into the corner. Now as he came on through, was there a tiny tap between them? No, there was not. It was counter steering there from Steffen Herrmann, and well, in doing so, trying to correct the car multiple times, just taking a little bit too much rear end, some oversteer kicking in. It was too much for him, and then it all unfolded from there. And well, whilst that happened, we take a look at the move from what was Steffen Krumholz's perspective and how it all ended up in disaster for the number 744 driver Arto Motorsport. Made his way up towards turn number 1. Of course, he won't know what's going to happen to Steffen Herrmann at this point. He won't see it at all. But as they make the way on in, he'll see that something starts to happen on the left-hand side. The car's gone a little bit deep, and then it's Herrmann that comes across the road, swings it back, and Krumholz has no way to react to that. And in the end, a knock to the tyre barrier there as well at turn number 2, and it's all ended in disaster for the 744 driver. But as we return to your live pictures now, Herrmann making his way out of the pit lane, where he's got the car repaired. He has had to come on in, he didn't have to be towed, but meanwhile, with 3 minutes to go, it is Neil Garner who leads here, and right now, the New Zealander charging on around ahead of Nathan Wade and Adam Miles as they make their way up towards turn number 9. They come up the hill once more, and well, it's a three-way fight for the win. There's no doubt about it. It was 7-second advantage over Ryan Jackson in P4. They bought themselves all the space in the world now to have it out and see who's going to be the winner. And of course, your eyes will need to be on Wade in particular, because of the fact he will definitely be absolutely eager to make sure he is a winner and finally adds another win to his tally, because right now it's a set of podiums that just keep on pouring in, but the wins never seem to come as they make their way in towards turn number 12. 2 more laps to go when they make their way towards the timeline this time around, and it's still Garner who leads ahead of Wade and Miles as they head on through and onto what will be the penultimate lap, the 22nd lap, as they head on through. And meanwhile, behind them, or as they come down, it's Ryan Jackson in P4, but we stay with the leaders for now. And as they head in towards the opening corner, it's going to be Miles who tucks out the inside, takes the initiative. Meanwhile, further back, oh goodness me, it's all kicked off here between Paul Smithers and what I believe is Jeff Randall or Ryan Jackson. Well, the two of them there. And I think there's a little bit of story about that. Was Jeff Randall with a brief off track? I think they may have been trying to go full wide in towards turn number 1, but then they've all negotiated. It was very near the mark, and Will Smithers there holding on to the coveted P4 position ahead of Daniel Tuss, with Jackson and Randall still side by side as they come on down the round in towards turn number 4. But everybody right now, they've all been very patient in this. They've all saved enough fuel to go battling all the way to the end. And now for each driver, it's all about giving it everything and seeing what they can deliver, as Randall trying to move towards the apex there versus Jackson. A little bit of a squeeze down, a lock up on the brakes for Randall. A bit of a tap to the rear from Jackson as they make their way out the corner. But Randall makes the move there into P6, and he makes it count at turn number 4. But coming around through turn number 6, Jackson will try and come back on the next lap. Meanwhile, from them, looking back to Pallanzioso, he's chasing after Gordon van den Bergen, as van den Bergen trying to hold on to P9 versus the Italian. And the Arto Motorsport blue driver, there's at least one more place to gain as he comes on through, but will he be able to get it done as he makes his way up towards turn number 9, towards the highest point of the circuit. Meanwhile, descending down to one of the lowest points of the circuit, Adam Miles on through it, comes out to 10, in towards 11 and out towards 12 he goes, and well, he's got half a second between himself and Neil Gardner, and Nathan Wade down in P3, but as he sweeps his way on around here, we still got 20 seconds on the clock. That means we will get one more lap as he heads towards the timing line, and it'll be a 23rd and final lap here in the round 12 feature at Phillip Island. White flag waving, Miles goes on to the final lap. He's got Gardner and Wade for close company, and now it's all down to positioning. For as Gardner looks up the inside, Miles does not defend this time. He sets himself up on a run on throw. Will stay with the leaders for the remainder of the race, ladies and gentlemen, as they head up towards turn number 2. Miles looking to try and come on back, but Gardner holds the position for now as they come on around, and we run on board the gearbox here of the 74 machine as he comes down towards turn number 3 and 4. Now he's got the lead position. At this point, it's about picking the right place to defend. We know Garner absolutely loves the inside line to turn number 4. He seems to go very well there in holding positions. He'll likely set himself up for it, or does he? As Wade getting a huge overspeed there out of the toe of both drivers. And you see Garner does defend the inside. He almost goes a bit deep but stops the car in time. Wade too wide here versus Miles. They come out the corner. This will cause Miles to have to go defensive into 6, which will cause both of them to lose speed. This will give Garner some space to play with as they make the way uphill now. Out to 6 and towards 9 they go. Gap is staying at 3.5 tenths, but it is closing little by little as the slipstream starts to take hold for Miles and Wade as they power the way up the hill towards turn number 9. We've gone to now 9. There's only really one major corner to go, and it's a slipstream run all the way to the line through 9. And as he goes through the left hand and down into the plummet, well, it is looking as though here Gardner's got everything covered up as he needs to. Miles still there immediately behind. It's the same for Wade. Well, now can either Miles or Wade find the slipstream they need through the final 2 corners? Because it's going to be a drag race to the line here, and Neil Gardner has bought himself 2.5 tenths. I don't think this is enough for him to be safe. He's going to have to think about where he puts himself as he comes out the final corner, as everyone will be looking for the toe here as they make the way to the line. It's going to be a drag race all the way to the finish, but who will it be? Gardner then runs on the outside. He straight lines it all the way. Miles gets his nose ahead. I think it's going to be Miles in the end takes the win in a 3-wide photo finish, and a Nathan Wade with Garner P3 losing 2 places come the finish line. In the battle for P4, Jackson just squeezes ahead of Tufts with Smithers P6 and Randall P7, and then it will be JT Capino who comes home at P8 ahead of Gordon van den Bergen P9 in the end. I think van den Bergen there with a bit of damage to the car by looks things. He makes his way out and through, and it'll be Pallanzioso P10 and complete in the top 10. A difficult race for van den Bergen and Pallanzioso with AJ Campbell coming to the timeline. It'll be a P11 for the Arto Motorsport driver as he makes his way across the line. A checker flag waving a blaze, and then very shortly it will be Steffen Herrmann and Steffen Krumholz who come on through in races that have not worked out for them, particularly for Steffen Herrmann after taking the win in race number 1 of the day. Race number 2 has just not gone his way after that late instant, and Krumholz the same for him. And the two, of course, coming together, and as they make the way on through the final corners, we'll give them all a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, where they fish at the front of the field or towards the rear of it. They've all absolutely poured their heart and soul into this way, you could tell, and I think exhaustion may be the word that comes to their minds come this Friday evening now, as Herrmann heads to the timeline ahead of Krumholz. And well, has he got enough fuel? I think in fact he's running on bingo fuel here as he comes on through. In fact, Steffen Krumholz will take P12 at the line ahead of Steffen Herrmann, so it's a little bit insult to injury there with Herrmann running out of fuel and having to limp, and Krumholz just taking one more position. But fantastic racing from start to finish, and here are the results subject to any stewards' inquiries. Well, after 40 minutes of racing in round 12 of the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy for 2023, hosted by Gone Skipping Racing and sponsored by Musical Money here on iRacing at the Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit in Australia, Adam Miles taking up the win in the end by what was 1.5 hundredths of a second. That's how close it was in the drag race to the line, and Nathan Wade once again being forced to settle for P2 when he looked to have it all in the run on the final stretch, but Miles just pipping him to the post. Neil Garner P3 losing out on the win, but still on the podium there, and a brilliant battle between the top 3 from start to finish, with Ryan Jackson P4 there in the second pack, finishing ahead of Daniel Tufts, who completed the top 5. Paul Smith has P6 in a very close-knit battle with Jeff Randall for God Skipping Racing. And then JT Capinen P8 there. The privateer ahead of Sickhead Races. Gordon Van den Bergen P9. And Pala Anzioso completed the top 10 for Alto Motorsport Blue. AJ Campbell best the rest, P11 for Alto Motorsport, finishing ahead of Steffen Krumholz and Steffen Herrmann, with Herrmann losing out on P12 and finishing P13 on the line there, and Krumholz just having enough fuel to get it through and take the place. Clark Williams, meanwhile, our sole retiree, finishing P14, 10 laps down in the end, but I do believe he may be classified as a finisher, given he was able to finish at least half the race before the major incident. But with that, ladies and gents, that concludes our racing here today in Australia, and indeed, what a race it has been. But the story is not all over yet, of course, because whilst the racing may stop for today, we still have our post-round interviews to come. And indeed, I think they're going to be some highly insightful interviews, because it was the calm before the storm in each race, and let's see what our drivers fall to it. We'll be back in approximately 12 to 15 minutes for our interviews, but don't go anywhere, you won't want to miss them. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is time for our post-round interviews with our selected volunteer drivers. We're going to be having 4 interviews this evening, and they're going to be 4 of our drivers who are right up at the front of the field. And we kick off immediately with the number 74 driver who put it on pole and made a pair of podiums, and that is Neil Gardner. And as he joins me in the interview room now, Neil, welcome to you this fine evening, or I believe it's the morning where you're currently based, and what a day of racing you've had at Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit, taking pole position and a double podium with it. You must be absolutely pleased, but I suspect there's a twinge of bittersweetness given you couldn't quite make it a win.
Well, no, I'm absolutely thrilled with that result. It's early in the morning here. I am deathly ill with COVID, and Phillip Island has been the best week of racing I've ever had. I've had a fantastic week. I've not lost a single official race, and this result in this company just tops a great week. So I'm very happy. Apart from the near death COVID.
Oh, I'm very sorry to hear you're suffering from COVID, and may you recover swiftly. But still, this has been an evening which will definitely make your spirits buoyant and help give you a major mental uplift. And you started it off with an absolutely superb pole lap in qualifying. I have to ask, how did qualifying feel for you?
Qualifying was really good. Because I'm at the other end of the world, the game releases me out of the pits after everybody else. So I actually had to pit after the first lap just to try and find some draft. I then found a pretty miraculous draft behind Adam, and just had a perfect quality lap. It was a quick lap and a double draft, so it was brilliant.
Oh, indeed, it was a beautiful lap to set yourself up with a major opportunity going into the first race of the day, and taking pole by almost 3 attempts and start at the front row of the grid. The run to turn 1, it's a long run here, and well, everybody's itching to get in the tow.
Yes, they are. It's if you start at the front of the grid, there's no braking until turn 2. So it's normally pretty simple from the front of the grid because nobody's really going to get that good a start to come past you into turn 2 on the first lap. You've just got to make sure that the cold tyres don't catch you out. The biggest issue for me I've found here at Phillip Island is the start of lap 2, where you've got full speed going into turn 1, and that starts to get a bit hairy for the first couple of laps. But yeah, lap 1's not too bad. The start of lap 2, that's where you've got to get brave.
And speaking of that bravery element, we saw in qualifying indeed, particularly in the sprint race, everybody running full attack. And around here, there's so many sweeping corners, but you're practically full throttle. In fact, you're full throttle for about 75% of the lap. And these cars are incredibly loose. Just how do you balance it?
A quite unreasonable amount of practice, basically. These cars, it's very interesting looking at the difference between these cars and the Formula Ford. And I've said quite often that when I'm driving or racing a Skippy, I'm spending about 10% of my brain driving the car and about 90% racing. Whereas in the Formula Ford, it's about 80% actually keeping the car on the track and leaving me not a lot of brain left for actually racing other people. So I far prefer these cars. They're a much more cerebral race as far as I can tell. But it's just stupid amounts of practice.
Well, they always say practice makes perfect, and it comes on through it true. And come the end of the sprint race, we saw you batting right up there and fighting to a P2 finish. You must have been pleased with that.
Yeah, extremely happy with that. There was a little bit of drama behind me into turn 4 on the in the last lap of the sprint race, which made it a little bit less dramatic for the last lap of the sprint race. But because the drama happened behind me, I'm all good with that. It was a really good race. It was very interesting how the entire sprint race really was done at a sprint. There were people passing everywhere all the time, and obviously by the time we got to the 40-minute race, there was a lot of people just making sure they were in a good position. The last half of the race, Adam, myself, and Nathan, we all just basically just held station and made sure that we secured that gap, and then the last lap or so, that's when we sort of fight it out.
Oh, indeed, and coming on to the second race of the day, we saw at the start practically the entire pack of 14 cars stayed together until the first pit stop was triggered approximately 14 minutes in by Jeff Randall. Did you react to that pit stop, or was it on schedule for you to pit a couple of laps later?
Apparently you can short fuel these cars by doing a funny dance with your keyboard and mouse and clicking a button at a certain time. I don't know how to do that. So I pitted when I needed 7.9 litres left. So that's what dictated my pit stop. I was a little bit lucky, I guess, that Adam Miles decided to pit at the same time. And while he did pass me in the pits, it meant I had a very good, very fast draft buddy for the second half of the race. So that worked out perfectly for me. My pit stop wasn't the perfect time, except that Adam made it the perfect time. So thank you, Adam.
Well, indeed. I'm not sure if he'll appreciate that or not, given the fact his goal was to break away. But still, the three of you came out onto the circuit together. And like you say, all try to work together initially in holding station to break away. And then the final 5 minutes unfolds and it becomes a drag race to the finish line.
Yeah, it does. Probably my weakest point on this track is turn 10, which is unfortunately the turn you've got to nail if you want to either stay ahead of somebody and then run to the line or pass somebody and then run to the line. So I just decided I wanted to lead out of turn 10 and just hope that that Nathan and Adam had a bit of a fight. But unfortunately they didn't. We're all side by side and the draft did its thing. So I'm absolutely thrilled with third. I couldn't have run a much better race at all. I've had a fantastic week here, so combined with feeling unbelievably sick the whole week, I don't know how I've done it. So loved the week, loved the race, loved the broadcast as well.
Well, thank you. And, well, the fact you've loved it so much around here, it has worked out so beautifully for you at Phillip Island. And in the championship going into the second half of the season, you've now moved up to P10 on 141 points. You're only 6 off your next target of Gordon van den Bergen. And next week, we make our way from Australia to what is, correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of our next round of the season. We head to Japan for the Okayama International Circuit. How are you feeling for that one?
Well, I'm probably where I am because I missed a couple of rounds. I think I missed the first round because I wasn't ready. I missed the second round because I had a real life motorsport, or the other round at a real life motorsport event to go to. So I'm hopefully going to make a few more places up. Okayama is a sort of a classic track. Probably not my favourite Skippy track, but this is early on a Saturday morning for me. I've got nothing else to do, and I love racing Skippy, so I'll be here.
Well, that's fantastic to hear, and we're all the better for you to be on the grid and bring your racecraft from round to round. And just before we do let you go, Neil, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out or a thank you to live on the broadcast this morning?
Well, I guess definitely thanks to Adam for putting at the right time to help me. Thanks to the small number of Twitch viewers I have that were supportive. And I guess biggest thanks at this point goes to all the scientists building COVID medications and vaccines. So that this has just knocked me about and given me a few days off work as opposed to killing me.
Oh, indeed, the science goes on, and well, we do hope you're feeling better for the next pair of rounds. But with that, Neil, it's been a pleasure to have you join me in the interview room. Congratulations once again on your double podium and also your pole position in qualifying, and we look forward to seeing you next week at the Okayama circuit.
Thank you. I'll see you then. Cheers.
All the best. So here and there from Neil Gardner, quite poorly, but you wouldn't be able to tell that from his voice. Absolutely ecstatic with energy. There's no question about it, given the fact he's had an absolutely brilliant week of racing here at the Phillip Island circuit in the officials, and then carrying it through into such a close field and bringing on home a double podium with the perfect pole position lap. Indeed, some would say, well, you want a perfect day, you want it to be a pole that turns into 2 wins, but I think for Mr. Gardner, it's all been about one thing and one thing only, enjoying the race and getting the greatest possible result he can out of it, and he's done that by a huge margin. And well, he'll be looking to feel a bit better next week. Indeed, modern medicine kicking on in, COVID out the way, and I suspect he could now really become a major force when we head to Japan for rounds 13 and 14. But as we move from our first interview to our second interview, we now come on to Jeff Randall for Godskipping Racing, and well, for Jeff Randall, it has been a difficult one today in terms of the races. There's been no question about it, with a difficult end in his first race in the sprint. And now feature race P7, where I think he may have been hoping for a little bit more compared to where he did finish in the end, albeit right in the nip and tuck pack from start to finish of that one. But as he joins me now in the interview room, Jeff, we talked midway through the races. Didn't quite work out in race 1, but race number 2. It didn't quite work out either by looks things.
Oh, it's a funny old game, isn't it? I mean, I was planning on doing an early pit stop, which I did, and it actually worked. And then, for some godforsaken reason, I switched my brain off for about 30 seconds, and I was concerned that I didn't have enough fuel. So I thought, I'm just going to be conservative for a little while. But what I should have done was got up to the back of Neil and Adam and then been conservative. So I ended up like a second back, and when you're a second back, then it's all over really. And off they went down the road. So I've only got myself to blame, and it turns out I had loads of fuel anyway. So yeah, my brain wasn't working.
Oh, goodness me. Well, a little bit of brain failure today down under in Australia. But still, let's talk about some positives. Qualified P2. And, well, in the words of Neil Garner only moments ago, setting the perfect lap. And it looked as though you put in a pretty special lap yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it is, as Neil said, it's all about just getting a little bit of luck and getting in the tow. If you can get in the tow of 2 cars, then you've got a pretty quick lap coming up. So, yeah, I was pleased with quali. No complaints there.
Oh, indeed, and being pleased with that one and putting in a good qualifying lap, because we talked a little bit about the sprint race and the P9 finish with that late mistake. So not to tread over old ground, but one question I did want to ask in the sprint race, when you're running in that pack, where do you normally prefer to be in the pack? Are you one of those guys who wants to be always up the front, or do you mind being in the middle and the back? Just take us through the sort of psychological aspect to that.
In the sprint race, I'm happier in first, second, and third. And we'll try and stay in first, second, and third until the last lap, because at least then you're going to be in with a shout for podium. So that was the plan. Didn't work, but give it another go, and that would be the plan again. So yeah, first, second, and third. I like it.
Oh, it makes sense and a good approach. And then coming to the feature race. Talk me through a little bit more about the pit stop, because we saw everybody running together. In fact, the whole 14-car field was running within a second of one another from car to car. And then you came into the pits and everybody seemed to twinge on that and start reacting.
Yeah, I was surprised as to how many people came in the pits as early as they did. I mean, I had a plan in my head that I figured it was going to be a bit of a skippy train, and that's not necessarily the quickest way to get around the circuit. So I thought, get in early and then do perhaps 3 or 4 qualifying laps before anyone else comes in. And then, well, the surprise for me was that more people came in the following lap. But it did sort of work. It got me back near the front of the leading group. But then, as I say, I just had that brain turn-off moment.
Oh, indeed, it was unfortunate your strategy was undermined by that moment, but still, it looked as though you were enjoying the battling for P4 all the way to the end, but it really started to kick off in the final few laps, and there was a 4 wide moment that saw you do a bit of rallycross.
Oh yeah, that was coming down the start-finish straight, trying to get past Ryan. I thought initially I was going to go to the left, and Ryan went to the left, so I then went to the right, and Ryan went a bit to the right, so I ended up on the grass, and that was a fun moment. Slight code brown, I suppose, but we managed to keep it all together. Yeah, that was good fun scrapping with Ryan and Steffen at the end there, and Paul of course as well.
Oh, indeed, a brilliant battling between yourselves. Saw you finish P7 at the checkered flag. And now, of course, as we make our way into the second half of the season, you've moved back into P4 in the championship. 2 points behind Rasmus Vuori, 2 points ahead of Adam Miles. And next week, it's the Okayama circuit in Japan. How are you feeling for it?
To be honest, I haven't raced it much in a skippy, so it's going to be a learning curve next week. Learn the circuit, figure it out, find out where you can and where you can't. Yeah, it's a nice new challenge. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, indeed, we look forward to seeing how you rise to the challenge in a week's time. But just before we do let you go, Jeff, is there anybody you'd like to give a thank you or a shout out to on the broadcast this evening?
Yeah, well, congrats again to our 2 winners, Steph and Adam, and Nathan for increasing his lead even more, and for everyone else for showing up and driving, and of course your broadcast, Paul. You're doing a great job. Much appreciated.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and I'm sure your fellow racers will be appreciative of your compliments to them. But with that, congratulations to yourself once again, and thank you for joining me in the interview room. We do look forward to seeing you out on the circuit in a week's time, but until then, have a fantastic weekend.
Thanks, Paul. See you next week.
All the best. The here and there from Jeff Randall, the 107 driver from Gone Skipping Racing, and well, what a day it's been for him today. In the fact, in qualifying, it worked out nicely. It was almost perfect to a P2, but in the sprint race, it was a late error that cost him quite dear, and in the feature race, it was not quite an error at first, but it was a bit of a mental blunder after he made his way out of the pits, after essentially being the first driver to come into the pits and could have given himself a great strategic advantage, but a little bit of mental hesitancy or a little bit of brain fade, in his own words, and just seeing himself lose out and being in that lead pack. But still, it's one for him to learn from, and a new challenge confronts him next week in Japan. And how will he rise to it, given the fact he's definitely an outside contender this time to be in the hunt for the championship? And I think if he could piece it all together on one evening, he could gain a huge haul and jump right back up there into the top 3. Well, as we come from our second interview to our third interview of the day, we'll very shortly be hearing from the number 24 driver of Nathan Wade. And, well, it has been an evening again where he's been thwarted from bringing home a win, but he was able to bring the numbers in sequence: a P4 in qualifying, a P3 in the sprint race, and a P2 in the feature. If we only had one more race session, I think it would have been a win in that one, but it wasn't to be today. And well, we get to hear his perspective on what has been a challenging one and just not having enough steam at the finish line to take the win in the feature. As he gets ready to join me in the interview room now, in fact he does join me now. Nathan, we caught up with you at the start of today. You're feeling confident, albeit just waiting to see how things were planned. It was always going to come down to the final lap, and in the end, a P3 in the sprint, a P2 in the feature, but just not quite a return to the top step. How do you feel your day's gone?
Hi, Paul. I'm happy because it's 2 podiums and it's good points at the end of the day. I'm slightly gutted with the feature race because I got a really good exit out of the last 2 corners, but I think annoyingly it was too good of a exit that I was too close to Adam going across the line. So I didn't quite get enough. Give it another 50 meters and I'd have been pipped him. But either way, it's a good point, so I'm happy with the result.
Oh, indeed, plenty more points going your way. And to start it off, a P4 in qualifying. It looked quite tough out there, but you formed an early train with Adam Miles, Jeff Randall and yourself. The 3 of you working together. I suspect you perhaps wanted to be a little bit further up the grid though.
Slightly. I haven't done any racing this week here, so I didn't really know how to race, if I'm honest. I was kind of learning what to do, but I just wanted to stay out of trouble. There's quite a few times, especially at the downhill hairpin, where it can tail back quite a bit, and everyone gets quite close if you're in a pack. Other than that, the sprint was pretty chill race. I spent a lot of it trying to actually get up and make some positions up because I just couldn't get out a 5th for, I don't know, half the race. But towards the end, it all sort of panned out well, apart from the last lap.
Oh, indeed, and on that last lap in particular, we saw it get very crowded in the run to turn number 4. Where did you find yourself in all of that?
Luckily on the outside of it. I think Gordon thought I was closer to him, but I just had to kind of turn out of the corner because I think we were going to clash if I hadn't have done. And then obviously I don't know what happened to Gordon, but I don't think he got. I don't know. He just didn't accelerate out the corner, and I think that threw Adam off guard. So he then tapped around Adam, and luckily because I turned out and I was on the outside, I managed to avoid the incident. Which put me in a nice little P3, I believe, at that point. And then I just wasn't close enough to get anywhere for the main straight, annoyingly. But I got quite lucky with it.
Well, indeed, Lady Luck favoured you in that regard. And then going into the feature race, it looked as though a lot of strategy was paying off because we saw you at the start do something we haven't seen before, which is drop backwards to the back of the top 10 and just sit there for a very long time. You're a patient man.
So the reason I had that issue, it was technical fault. My iRacing sim crashed just after the sprint race, so I had to restart my PC and restart my rig and everything. When I turn my rig on and load up iRacing, I have to put 100% brake pressure on, otherwise it will take 5% brake pressure as 100, and I hadn't done that. and I forgot about it. So when I started and went to go into turn 2, luckily I was on the outside. I tapped my brake, and it put 100% pressure on. So I locked up all fours, and then had to quickly reset it by applying 100% again, and then tuck in. So I was quite lucky that I didn't cause any incidents there. Because if I was taking the race in line there, people would have hit me 100%. So I got away quite luckily with that one.
Oh, goodness me, we didn't realise that, but again, you've definitely had luck go your way today. And after that technical infringement with regards to your equipment and whatnot, able to bring it back together and then starting to make headway, and then an interesting pit stop, seeing you jump to the head of the pack.
It's taken 6 or 12 rounds this season, but I finally done a good pit stop. I didn't overfuel, I didn't underfuel. I just about nailed it. So I definitely had to ease off a little bit just to make sure that Adam and Neil got into my pack, because I needed to do a bit of fuel saving. But other than that, I've actually done a good pit stop for once, so that was quite nice.
Well, indeed, it worked out there, and then the three of you gradually broke away from the rest of the field and put 7 seconds between yourselves and the hunt for P4 before the battling kicked off. And we saw the run into the final corner, how that played out. But just take us through, the three of you working together sometime. Are you all on comms, or are you just simply all sort of mind reading one another, say, okay, to me, to you?
Me and Adam have driven with each other so much now. We know what we're doing. There's mutual respect there as well. So I think as soon as we saw we were in that pack and we had I think it was second half 2-second gap to the guys behind, we knew if we just did a little swap in the train every lap, we'll gradually get away. And I think they had a big pack anyway, so they kept falling behind, so it weren't too bad. It also allowed us to both fuel save as well, just so we definitely had enough fuel for the end, and then it just gave that cracking last lap that we had.
Oh, most definitely. And with regards to that final lap, we did see the two of you battling quite hard, with Neil Garner being given a bit of breathing room, but you both came very quickly back to Neil Garner on the final few corners.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to be in second place for the last corner, which is why I tried to send it on him into turn 4. But as soon as we went side by side, I was like, I'll let him have it back. I don't want to lose Neil. I'd much rather take a third than not have a chance at the win, if that makes sense. So tucked back in, caught back up to Neil. And I think, like I said earlier, I think I just got too good of an exit out of the last 2 corners, that I was too close to Adam. And so I just didn't have enough slipstream to put my top speed high enough to then pass him. But yeah, it is what it is. I'll take the P2, and it's good points.
Oh, indeed. And speaking of points, after today, you now stand 168 points clear of Steffen Herrmann in P2. Only 1 win to your name, but now 10 podiums. And we head to Okayama next week for the start of the second half of the season. Can this continue?
Yeah, definitely. I love that track. As long as I can just stick with the consistent podiums, I would like to get back up to the top step. But providing I keep getting these podiums and just bringing in the points, championship's more important in my eyes. So that's what we're eyeing up halfway through.
Oh, indeed. It's a good focus to have. And just before we do let you go, Nathan, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
As always, yourself for putting on a wonderful broadcast, and then Jeff and everyone else behind the scenes that do all the work on the league. You'll do a brilliant job, and then everyone in those front packs today. It was good racing. More the feature than the sprint. The sprint was a bit hectic, but it was a good, enjoyable racing either way.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you in the interview room with us, Nathan. Congratulations once again on your double podium and that ever-growing championship lead, and will long may it continue when we head to Japan next week.
Cheers, Paul.
All the best. So here and there from Nathan Wade, our championship leader, who continues to carry all the momentum forward with him as we make our way into the second half of the season. Next time out, he is proving to be a man who is continuing to hone his abilities out there. He's been very fast, he's been very consistent, but the one thing that has eluded him up to today is an ideal or a perfect pit stop. But he's now pulled one of those off, so he'll have his full arsenal together. Still eager to make it another win after only one win against his name so far and 10 podiums. But when he's 168 points clear at the front of the field, I think he can look past that for a little bit longer, but you can understand he's eager to make sure he can get another win at some point. But definitely right now the firm favourite at the front and making it work today. The only thing that went wrong was the fact he had too good a run out the final couple of corners in the draft and wasn't quite able to slip through his way past the victory and had to settle for second. But still, as far as things go, that's nothing too bad and one final step that he can potentially improve upon. But here and there from our championship leader, we now come on to our final interview of today, and it's the number 85 driver of Adam Miles. And well, Adam Miles definitely proven to be a very fast and agile driver out there when it comes to his strategic flexibility, and we'll be hearing from him very shortly as to his thoughts on what has been a solid day for him and a day that has seen him move up to P5 in the championship at a critical juncture. But as he gets ready to join me in the interview room, in fact, he does join me now. Adam, good evening and welcome to you. And what a day it has been. Qualifying a P5, a P6 in the sprint race, and you turned it all around in the feature with the win. Phillip Island has been kind to you by the looks of things.
Hi, Paul. Yeah, pretty kind. I mean, if you can come to any of these rounds with the quality of the field that's here and get a win, it's been a good day. I'd have just liked a little bit more in the sprint race, I think.
Well, indeed, and dissecting your day, of course, in qualifying, it was always going to be close between drivers, but with Neil Garner getting perhaps the perfect lap and the right amount of tow, getting P5 on the grid, no mean feat, but it did look as though perhaps there could have just been a little bit more tow in your lap.
Yeah, I can't really even remember actually how early in the session I got that lap. I'm just gonna have a look. Yeah, it was a few laps from the end, and so I did my duty. I did some sort of leading the train, pulling around people, and then I think on the laps where I was sort of second or third in line, the cars ahead just made little mistakes, and I ended up driving the second half of the lap, sort of at into the wind, as it were. So yeah, I never really got the right tow, but I kind of always knew that as long as I was not at the back, then I was going to be able to make my way forward at a track like this.
Oh, indeed. And speaking of making your way forward in the sprint race, we saw it was very tight with a top 8 battling for the win. You found yourself right in the middle of it all the way through. But for the most part, I think you were very eager to be up the front.
Yeah, because it's as with the Skippy, if you find yourself in P4 or P5, you get sort of draft locked. You get a great exit out of a corner, and P3 can maintain distance with you, even though you're sat right under their gearbox. So I didn't want to fall any lower than third, ideally. So I wanted to, first, second, third was absolutely fine. But towards the middle and latter half of the race, I'm not sure. I think there was some incidents around with Gordon. I had to avoid a few stens going to hairpins and things, and it put me back down to about P5. I think it was maybe even P6 at one point in the last few laps, and so it was difficult to make ground again. And then there was the accident with Gordon on the, I think it was the last lap.
Well, indeed, and we were going to contact. It looked very tight into turn at number 4, and in the end it was a brief touch between yourself and Mr. Vandenbergen that saw the two of you lose out places.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't trying to make a move there. I was quite happy to be behind him on the way out the corner, but I'm not sure. He just didn't accelerate out the corner in the way that I expected. We were well past the apex, and it sounds like maybe he was on the clutch or something like that, because the engine revs went way up before I even made contact with his car. So a bit of a strange one, just slowing down on the apex, and I just got caught out, tapped him, and then I think probably lost a couple of places after that. So not ideal, but the car was still pointing forward and didn't have any damage. So P6 was a fair result for having an accident on the last lap. Could have been worse.
Well, indeed, it could have been worse, but you carried on through, and it set you up for what was in the end a start of, a Yeah, P5 on the grid for the feature, and well, the feature race at first was quite a slow race. Everybody trying to save as much fuel as they possibly can, and then the big strategic onslaught.
That's right. Yeah. I think with the reverse grid, put some of the slightly slower cars at the front, let's say. So I just didn't feel that it was the best plan to try and just make my way to the front, because I was not going to be able to get away. It doesn't matter how fast you are. And so all you end up doing is putting yourself sort of in the firing line. You're using extra fuel. So I was just happy to sit kind of wherever I wanted to be. It was P6, P7, P5, 7, 8, just moving backwards and forwards, saving as much fuel as possible. And then my plan was really to do what I've done in previous races, which was pit as early as possible, because I'd saved some fuel, and I thought if I can get even just one lap, maybe 2 laps by myself. The pace up front was not stellar, so I thought I might even be able to do faster laps without the draft. But on the lap that I was going to pit, somebody else, I think Jeff pitted, and then I did another lap, and then I think I came in behind Neil, who ended up in my slipstream. So I never really got what I wanted, which was some clear air outside of anyone's draft. So as it turned out, we caught Nathan, and so it was just caught Nathan, dropped Jeff, and then it was just a 25 minutes of casual driving and then setting up just the final lap.
Oh, indeed, it was the calm before the storm. The three of you running together for so long and breaking away from the rest of the pack. And then just in those closing laps, setting yourself up for success. You found yourself typically battling with Nathan Wade, with Gardner up front. Just take us through that from your perspective, because then you just timed it right to take the win.
Yeah, this is one of the ones where you can, with a really good exit, you can win it from first. With a good exit, you can win it from second. And with a good exit, you can win it from third. So I wasn't too bothered about where I was on the last lap. I probably would have taken P2 if you'd offered me the choice of the 3. So I had to defend a little bit against Nathan, but had he forced the issue and put me back to P3, I think I would have been fine with that as well. So got a good exit out the last corner, and as I suspect Nathan has already told you, he got a very good exit and just ended up kind of sat underneath my gearbox through the last corner. And so when he pulled out, he just had no overspeed, and I had some side draft off of Neil, which just got my nose ahead. But yeah, it's a little bit of a lottery. I can't claim to have mastered Phillip Island last quarter, and there's no additional skill there. It was really just right place at the right time, and I'm happy to take out a win.
Oh, indeed, and in the end, it's one of the closest margins we've seen a victory achieved this season, by only 1.5 hundredths, if that. And well, with that win combined with the sprint race P6, it means now you've moved into what is P5 in the championship on 187 points, and you're only 4 points off of Rasmus Vuori in P3, with Jeff Randall between the two of you. How are you feeling now going into the second half of the season? Because you've joined us a little bit late, but you've been a very fast charger.
Yeah, it's a bit disappointing actually. I was out of the country on business for the first 2 weeks, so wasn't able to join, and then had a Easter Friday meal with the family. So I'm unfortunately gonna have to drop 3, and I think there's only 2 drop rounds in the championship. So I've sort of been treating it as, well, I'm not in the championship, so I can just enjoy every race, try and get as many wins as possible. So hopefully I'll move my way up the championship through the latter half as sort of drop rounds kick in for other people, and they kick in a little bit later for me. So yeah, looking forward to every race on the calendar from here on out. And I don't know if P2 in the championships may be still on, so that would be my goal. But I think Nathan's a little bit too far ahead now to catch.
Well, we'll have to wait to see how it all unfolds in terms of the battle for P2. But your thoughts on Okayama next week, the Japanese circuit with the twists and turns?
Yeah, I mean it's not a track that I look not super excited every time it comes around, but it's also a good track. It's quite technical. Has a couple of passing opportunities down into turn 1 and then down the back straight into the hairpin. So looking forward to it. The feature race especially, with some strategy, I'll try and get myself out of sync with everyone else and see what I can do.
Well, we do look forward to seeing how that works out for yourself in a week's time. But just before we let you go, Adam, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
Shout out to everyone in the top group there. I driven with Nathan a lot, driven with Neil a lot, so Full respect from both of those. There was never going to be an issue between us. So it was a great racing them, and of course yourself always for the broadcast. I'll be watching it back over a late dinner.
Well, thank you. And, well, I think your competitors and rivals will really appreciate those kind words. And like we've appreciated having you join me in the interview room this evening, Adam. It's been a pleasure to have you, and congratulations once again on your win in the feature. Perhaps it didn't quite work out in the sprint, but definitely that championship momentum is coming. And we look forward to seeing how you get on in a week's time in Japan.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. So hearing there from Adam Miles, number 85 driver and the privateer, having a mixed day with regards to the fact that Phillip Island was kind to him to a degree, but it could have been a little bit kinder in the sprint race after that late instant between himself and Gordon Vandenbergen at turn number 4. What could have been a potential podium ended up with a P6, but still in the feature race he turned the frown around and made sure to keep pushing on, and then in the end with a little bit of strategy being interrupted with Jeff Randall's early pit stop, and of course Adam there making it clear to us that he normally targets trying to put himself into clear space. In the end, he had to gamble on picking the lap after Jeff Randall and found other drivers coming in at the same time, but he was able to get his foot down and make sure to thread himself into the top three. Himself, Neil Gardner and Nathan Wade running away, and it became a three-way battle for the win, and it was through the exit out of the last couple of corners where he timed it right. Meanwhile, Wade may have got the faster run out the corner and timed it to perfection, but he was too close to Miles in order to be able to outdraft the pair of Gardner and Miles, and it was Adam Miles who would take the win. And well, Mayfield says he's not quite in the hunt for the championship win, but the fact he's galvanised to go charging for P2, we're definitely going to see some sparks fly from the number 85 driver, and how high can he rise? Well, we'll see his campaign continue its story in a week's time. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard from all of our interviewees this evening. They've included, firstly, the number 74 driver of Neil Gardner, the privateer, and then we heard from God's Given Races 107, Jeff Randall. We then also heard from Nathan Wade, our championship leader in the 24 privateer machine, and you've just heard from the privateer in the 85 of Adam Miles. Congratulations to all four of them for their performances today. Thanks to them for joining me in the interview room, of course, and we've definitely appreciated them. There's no question about that. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed today's show and you want to know more about the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, why not check out the official Skip Barber Challenge Trophy Discord, where we host this series at Gone Skipping Racing, and you can find out all the more about the series. Perhaps you're sat there right now thinking that I'd love to be on the grid for the second half of the season, or you just want to know more about the Skip Barber Formula 2000 machine, the ins and outs, the quirks of the cars. We're all very friendly in the Discord, and we'd be more than happy to welcome you and help you with any questions you do have. We'd also like to take a brief moment at Gone Skipping Racing to give a big thank you to our sponsors, Musical Money, the sponsor for this series. Their web address www.musical-money.co.uk, and Musical Money, of course, the quick, easy and safe way to turn your musical equipment into money. But speaking of money, ladies and gentlemen, our drivers will look to be on the money next week, for then they make their way to Japan for rounds 13 and 14 and a week's time on Friday the 28th of April 2023. It is a circuit that's very different to the ones we've seen so far. Whereas we've seen a lot of circuits which can see our drivers run flat out for the entirety of the lap, and indeed run on extended straights and into high speed corners, Okayama does have some of those, but what it also does have is a wide array of twists and turns, and also some very tight sequences of corners where we may see some too wide moments, but there will be battles on the brakes, and indeed drivers will need to be brave if they want to carry the speed around in order to take victory. How our drivers get on, we'll find out then, but until then, we have been Gone Skipping Racing. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain and Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, have a great weekend, and remember to stay on track. Good night.